Okay, can I have everybody's attention? We got a tight schedule here today, and okay, we want to go ahead and get started. We got a real tight schedule here today, and if we want to get out before 5 or 6, I think we need to utilize the time we have, because I've got some other things I want to talk about too. But I'd like to start off by asking Representative Williams to ask a blessing.
Let us pray. Almighty, everlasting God, eternal God, we thank you for the opportunity. We thank you for the members of this committee. We thank you for those that have come to share information with us. Now bless us and make us remember why we're here and who we're here for. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I've been tasked with asking several questions beyond what we normally do in these meetings, and I'm just going to read them to you to start off with. So I think many of you already know the answers to these, but I just wanted you to be prepared. Does the money included in the proposed budget for the 2000 COLA adequately fund that for all of your agency? I think that's an easy one. Number 2 is, what is the head count and how many vacancies do you have in your agency? Number 3 is, what is your turnover rate? Number 4 is, do you have any capital needs that aren't funded? And number 5 is, do you collect any fees that cover the operations of your department that we don't appropriate? If so, what are they, how much, and what are they used for? So I'm aware of some of them already, but if you need to seek out that information, it would probably help us move along if you can do that. First up is Department of Community Affairs. I'm sorry. There we go. Where's my schedule? Okay. Oh, okay. My mistake. I don't see our GEMA folks in here. Hiding in the corner. Come on.
I appreciate you saving the best for first this year.
Well, that's open to judgment.
We are page 14
Okay,
on
I got
the
it.
tracking sheet, sir. All right. Mr. Chairman, we appreciate y'all's time today. I would like to run through our stuff real quick to answer some of your questions. 27.61, no, sir. It falls woefully short, unfortunately, of the requirement for our agency. And it kind of goes hand in hand with where we want to talk about the 27.64 in just a second. Some of the increases there obviously cover only the premium for DOAS as well as the merit system billings. That's still only a small percentage of our employees there. But I want to hit for just a second on 27.6.4. And I know there's been some conversations had. Last year, the House and the Senate approved us an additional $704,841 for our cost of living raise, and the verbiage I've provided to you to read directly off was, yes, it is an increased funds for career retention, as well as to finalize the career retention plan, 704,841. But then if you'll see in your packet of slides, there was some disregard language that was put in. And the heartburn I think we have in the disregard language, and if you go to the not the cover sheet, but the third sheet, you'll see in the disregard language from last year's, it says state funds should not be used to subsidize federal activities, and using these funds for federal employees could create future supplantation concerns. We have a issue there because I would be very honest and say that my employees are not federal employees. They pay into the same employee salary. They pay into the same benefit package that all our employees. Yes, we do receive some federal funding, but the numbers just are not there. Yes, we have some silos, as you know, Chairman, where we have certain allocations that are given to us, but that leaves us short. So if we remove the 704 and replace it with 79,000, not only do we go backwards 704 from what we were able to accomplish last year, but we're also now in the hole. The total number would be roughly 986,774 is where it would put us behind the curve just to get us back to broke. We're not looking to get ahead. We're not looking to, pat our pockets, but that 986,774 is just to cover the cost of living for the 5,000 last year and the 2,000 this year. So you ask a couple questions. Does it cover it? No, sir. We're currently budgeted for 155 positions at GEMA Homeland Security. We have 148 that are filled. You ask about revenue. Part of our agency, yes, receives federal funding. We are also, we have GECA, the Georgia Emergency Communications Authority. They are a revenue-based, but we do not calculate them in our salary impacts because they do cover their own allowances. So that 986,000 is just for my GEMA and Homeland Security side of the house. The final point on that 27.6.4 is that it was specifically set aside for increased warehouse space. We have started conversations with JustFIC, and so there's been conversations about removing that. I get it. We would like it just added to our annual budget. And I know it's just add 700,000, but if you'll look at the salary impact that you'll see there on the second to the last slide that I presented, currently our state allocation is for last year minus that 704 that was redirected is $2.5 million from the state. It seems like a lot in my personal account, but whenever it comes to state dollars, it's not very much for the investment. But if you look, you got to go all the way back to 2018 to see where we are. We're finally back to 2018 numbers. We had gotten an increase to 2.8 in 2019, but we were asked to take a 14% reduction to our budget, and we've never gotten back to 2018. In 2018, our salaries were $11 million due to cost of these COLAs that have been given to us and some retention efforts. With no other funding provided, we're now at a $15 million salary increase. So we are $4 million short with no increase to our budget. We've been asked to reduce. So we've reduced. We've also picked up a lot of projects. As you all know, we had this little thing called COVID swing through the state. And during our COVID times, we picked up a lot of new responsibilities for the state. We have a new building at Forsyth that doubled as a hospital. It can stand up 40 beds at any given time. That's a $40,000 a year operating and maintenance bill that we've picked up. The farmers market in Macon that we took over to create a hub and spoke mechanism to get rapid needs during disaster, which benefited us greatly recently in the Griffin tornado event. That's a $50,000 a year increase. During COVID, we were able to acquire 16 generators, or that was actually right before COVID, which served greatly. It's another 66,000 travel trailers that were given to us during COVID to house COVID sick patients over at Hard Labor Creek State Park that opened immediately. That's 13,000. Just in those alone, plus a couple other issues we've had, that puts us at around $150,000 more outgoing on things that are state responsibilities, that are state allocations. So I know that's a lot of positive news there, sir, but I would ask that this committee consider not reducing that 704, but actually adding it into our standard budget moving forward. The 3.7 number feels really good to our agency. We're not asking for what you'll hear from some of these other agencies. And I had Mark, who's over here with us, he put together some numbers that I think are the most telling. Over the last 3 years, our agency, with our 148 employees, was it, Mark? 148 employees in 2020 brought into the state $162,371,000. In 21, we brought in $267,662 million, and in 2022 we've brought in $70 million with funds still increasing. If you take away everything the state has given from that total, our agency has profited for the state on pass-throughs $492,463,000. It's a very small investment, sir.
Those are your federal funds that you receive.
This is pass-through grants, Homeland Security,
Right.
EMPG, all of those, public assistance, hazard mitigation, where we've fought to assist. We only get to keep a very small portion of those, sir.
And there's a 25% match on most of them.
Yes, sir, that is
Yeah.
correct.
And, you know, we're very familiar with your problem, and you're not, it's not unique to you.
Yes, sir.
There are 2 or 3 other agencies that come before us that are primarily federally funded that have the same problem, and I think we fixed them all in the supplemental. Didn't we fix yours?
Yes, sir, we fixed the majority of it, yes, sir. And
Okay.
part of what the conversation was is the amended was that 704 number. We used it for match because for a lot of those, as you
Right.
know, we have to have match dollars, dollar for dollar on all our holdovers.
Right.
Yes, sir. So that's all I have for you, sir.
Well, do we have any questions? We're familiar with it, and it's a work in progress, and having been there before, I understand where you're coming from, and it's difficult sometimes. And those, the Governor's Office of Highway Safety and CJCC, all of you are similarly situated, and it's I think probably the size of the agency probably makes it more difficult because sometimes you get overlooked. I don't even know whether you got a governor's hearing or not. No. Okay. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And now the Department of Community Affairs. Community Supervision. I just got my tracking sheet about the time you all did.
That's all right, Mr. Chairman. Doesn't matter what you call me, as long as you call me. Good to see you and members of the committee. Thank you. I have Olivia Duke here as our Chief Financial Officer. I provided you a copy of the presentation. First thing I want to mention is our mission. Everything we do, from funding to anything else, should always come back and be directly tied into our mission. That's our checks and balances. There are 5 points I do want to share with you very, very briefly. You'll see a graph, 5 graphs there. I'm going to summarize those very quickly. Georgia has the highest number of individuals under felony supervision in the nation. Of those that we supervise, 26% are sentenced for violent crimes. Contrary to a lot of belief, prison revocations or probation revocations does not drive the prison population. In fact, only 1% of our population was revoked to prison last year. The reasoning behind that 1%, of those, 79% were for new charges. But the most important thing I want to share with you and brag on the men and women of DCS is we have one of the highest successful completion rates at 87%, despite that. We had some good news. You've heard a lot associated with violent crimes. We engaged with the Council of State Government to do a report and a statistical analysis of our offender population. I'd mentioned it back before the Senate Public Safety, but I can't tell you what's driving violent crime, but I can tell you what's not, and it's not the offender population under DCS. And the reason I say that is they looked at our entire population going back 4 years, and there's been no increase in arrest in that period of time, which tells me we're not contributing to it. So that report is going to be published, but I did want to share that with you, being that we just got that. So again, I want to brag on the men and women of DCS. Now to the money. We have our general normal costs, the cost of living adjustment, the COLA, DOS premiums, telework billings, and merit system assessment for $5.8 million. The only other ask is by way of a capital request, 141 replacement vehicles statewide of $5.4 million. To your questions at the beginning of the hearings regarding our COLA, yes, sir, we are fully funded for those. Regarding our tenure, we currently have 1,778 employees. We have 309 budgeted positions that have been advertised for hire, and we have a 14% turnover rate. As to the capital needs that are not funded or requests, we have none other than those that are just mentioned. In regards to fees to the state, we do not collect any. The only fees we collect are relating to fine fees and restitution. Fines are remitted back to the county and the court of conviction. Our restitution is prioritized as first collection and goes directly to the victim. And our probation fees are remitted to the general treasury. So that concludes my presentation, unless there are any questions.
We got a couple of questions for you, but just for everybody here, the universal items that'll be on everybody's list, the COLA and the adjustments to agency premium. You don't have to discuss that when you come up unless you have a need. And if the COLA if you don't have the money for the COLA, please, as I asked in the questions at the beginning, please tell me about that. Number 23.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the calculation of your successful completion rate, how many years do you use to calculate that?
Throughout their entire length of supervision, which, by the way, if you're on for straight probation, your average time is 6 years. If you've been part of prison on that sentence, it's going to climb to 8 years. So just to give you an idea of what the population is looking like, the way we calculate it, did they successfully complete their supervision without a revocation to prison?
Okay. All right. And question about the replacement vehicles.
Yes, sir.
That's just for your officers to travel around, is that right?
That's correct. Our officers, that is their office.
Right.
If you'll remember, about 2 to 3 years ago, I know, Chairman, you're very familiar with it, we got away from the majority of our brick and mortar buildings. We were at about 120. Our belief is community supervision is not done in an office, it's done out in the community. So what we did, our vehicle count is 1 vehicle is allocated to 2 officers. Quite candidly, we looked at a one-on-one, and we just didn't think that was fiscally responsible because they would sit there more than they would be used, and that's why we went for a 1 vehicle to 2 officers.
All right, thank you.
Number 22.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
You ruined about 75% of a lot of people's campaigns to try to convince people that all this crime is being committed because we let them out of prison too soon. I don't know, but as 1% of probation revocations, that's certainly not driving the crime picture. But I'd certainly be interested in getting some feelings sometime. We can do it offline for what is driving. It seems like you got a whole lot of new faces around. So, we need to address that, certainly. But thank you for your information. It was
yes, sir. And I wish I could tell you what was driving crime, but I'm one that, for the most part, I'm gonna stay in my lane and look.
All right, I won't be coming to ask you that.
No, and I will speak for Commissioner Oliver. I want you to understand that if I'm correct, about 30% of his prison admissions are violations of probation or parole. However, that only represents 1% of our population. A lot of times that gets lost in the narrative there.
Well, I'll certainly ask Commissioner Oliver when he gets here. I know he'll have some answers.
Make sure I've left by that time.
Any further questions? Well, we appreciate what you
Thank
do,
you.
and I think going to the vehicle patrolling and being out in the public and doubling up probably has been very a benefit for the state, and all I've heard is positive comments about it. So.
Good. Thank you kindly, sir. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you.
And when you come up here, you have the opportunity, if you want, if you've got staff with you and you'd rather sit at the table, that's fine with us. It's just the first couple of people walked up, went to the podium. So Let me see who we got next.
Half the room is staff, that don't come with you.
Georgia Department of Corrections, you're gonna get your chance here right quick.
There we go.
Mr. Oliver. Moving on from juvenile justice.
Oh, yeah.
Getting with the adults now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. To your questions, currently our head count, our total funded positions are right around 10,919 positions. Our current vacancy statewide for all positions is 4,419. Current turnover rate for COs, that's just our security officers, our CO 1 and 2s, are at 47% for FY 2022. We're projected to go down to about 41% as we're seeing our numbers they're looking a lot better for projected FY 23. Department-wide, our current turnover rate is 33%, 33.7%. So that's where we're sitting at on our turnover rate and our head count.
Did a couple of pay raises help you with retention? I know it was higher than that. And
Yeah, I believe so. Looking at the numbers, looking at the data, and talking to the team, we really believe that the pay raises did boost us up a little bit more. As well, we're doing a cultural assessment as well, so we be able to fine tune that a little bit. But we're seeing more people come in the door than we're losing. We're starting to retain a lot more. Just got an update this morning that we're seeing numbers back, applications rather, back pre-pandemic levels. And so, but we're also losing a lot of those applicants in the background process. So we're gaining momentum in that respect, that we're having more applicants to apply. We're up, our academy classes are at pre-pandemic level, and we're not losing. We're netting employees at the end of the month. So it's good to see.
And it's difficult, I know, with the economy like it is right now, and there are more jobs on the outside, some of them which pay a lot more than, and always during positive times, we seem to lose people in the state government. And, during times of recession or depression, we seem to
come back.
But
Yeah. But we have a lot of good, dedicated men and women out there on the ground that's doing the work, that's committed to the mission, and that's what we want to see. And so I'm just super proud of the job that they're doing out there. And as respect for your time, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure. I know I may have answered some of your questions, but what was the next one again? I mean, vacancy.
man, I've lost track.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Capital repairs and maintenance. I think that was one of them. We're looking pretty good on that as GISFIC and OPB, they're going around and doing an assessment of all our facilities, so we have a better idea of where we stand on that. But they're currently doing that, and that should be done, completed by August. So we'll have a better idea. But as of right now, what's funded right now, we should.
We put a lot of money in the supplemental for
Absolutely.
maintenance and repairs too.
Yes.
It's
And in our bond package. So yes.
Yeah.
And as far as other fees associated, we have our work details, our pharmacy, cell phone fines, commissary, inmate telephones. It's estimated about $25 million. 13.5 was appropriated, and we used the remaining 11.5 for our shortfalls in other programs.
How much shortfall?
11.5 million.
Out of that 25 million, how much of that is work details? Just around.
Around 7 million.
Where does all the other come from?
Just different fees and fines. If they get a pharmacy in a prescription, offenders have to pay $25 for that. We have assorted fees, and if, like Commissioner stated on the cell phones, if they get caught with a cell phone or with alcohol or something, there's fines for those things.
What if they don't have $25?
Excuse me?
What if they don't have $25 on a
Then
pharmaceutical?
it goes on their books, and if somebody gives money to them, then it's paid through that. And then, of course, $5 copay for the prescription.
But they're never denied.
No,
No.
they're never denied. Inmate telephone, that brings in about $6 million. And then the commissary, you're talking about another $5 million. So
That's a fine for the inmate.
No, inmate telephone is revenue made off of the telephone calls.
Not the contraband phones. Just-
If you could tag that, I think there'd be a lot more revenue.
And the
there.
majority of those fees, just so we're clear, also have to be spent on something to the benefit of the offender. So usually goes to healthcare and things of that nature.
Okay.
We can't just use it for anything.
And that's in statute too. And if you would, I don't know if you want me to go through, I know you didn't want to go through all the statewide changes, but we do have some new programs.
Those that are your priorities. I mean, substantive issues.
Okay.
We can talk offline about some of the others if you.
Okay. I think the really substantive issue, I think, is the establishment of the correctional officer 3 position. As we talk about recruitment and retention, what we're seeing is that we're losing most of our staff within the first year or two, sometimes a little bit earlier. And with that creation of that CO3 position, that'll allow us to keep that correctional officer for at least 2 years. They come in, and after 6 months, they're able to go from a CO1 to CO2 after completion of their academy or their training classes, and then hopefully after that they'll move up to CO2, CO3 within that first 2 years. If we can get them to that point, I think we'll be we'll drive that turnover rate down with our COs, because we're losing them all according to our data within that first 2 years, majority within the first 1 year.
Because that's the end of the line for them, unless they get promoted or get a cost of living raise.
And the majority of the people that's leaving us are obviously the millennials and Gen Z. So we dug down on that data, and they want to see that progression, that ladder. And so hopefully they'll get them to see that track and get them to stay a little bit longer.
Okay.
And then our next significant issue is our bonds, and that's going to be on tracking number 50.2.3.40. Not sure what page that is on your sheet,
We
but
don't have that, do we? No, we don't have the bonds.
Okay.
That's done separately.
all right. But again, that's for major repairs and maintenance, about 26 million, and that's major repairs and maintenance for projects statewide, and also 11.8 million to replace some vehicles, 231 vehicles statewide, and so that's really gonna help us out a bunch.
We replaced a lot of vehicles last year. We gave you extra vehicles for the transportation of from. I got a question this morning about, and I don't guess it pertains to you too much, about the subsidy we pay for inmates in correctional institutions and jails. I thought we'd up that, but I learned that that hadn't been upgraded in a long time, and that probably doesn't affect you.
It was right before COVID.
Right.
The General Assembly and the Governor and the General Assembly funded $1 increase. We went from 20, and because we had lost several county institutions, we had some excess funds, so we increased it from 20 to 22.
One,
That was
okay.
right before COVID.
they get $22 a day for.
Correct.
Okay. And what's the jails are $30? Or
No.
that doesn't affect you?
That
after the 15 days if we don't
Right.
pick somebody up.
Okay. Well, I saw one on the list that I saw that one county said they were retaining prisoners 1 to 3 years.
no, if it's over the 15
We
days.
can talk offline about that too.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And Mr. Chairman, that'll be it. So I'll entertain any questions that you all may have.
Okay. I think your friend's got one.
All right, Mr. Williams.
While you were talking, Mr. Commissioner, I came up with another one, so I've got two.
All right.
The first one you heard, and in your opinion, you probably see more criminals than the average person in this state. I have an idea what do you think is driving it. The question I really want to ask, I've been asking for years and years, never gotten it answered. So I know that this is a buy for you because you're brand new on it, but I'd like for the next time I see you, come up with an answer. The cost of turnover. As an old productivity consultant, there's a real cost to turnover, but we never factor that in or talk about it. The only figure I've ever heard is what it costs to train a trooper. I've heard that. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody reduces it to the actual cost of turnover. That money does not float around in the cloud. That's real money that it's costing. Unfortunately, most managers don't look at it as real money, and then they wonder, why have I gone out of business? So would you get me that? Because you have probably one of the highest turnover rates in the state. Tell us what it costs you to have turnover that high. And then it would be a whole lot easier to swallow decent salaries for COs.
Yes.
When they know, you're going to spend it here, you're going to spend it there, but you're spending it already. Now tell me what the problem is with crime, sir, and you got about 2 minutes.
Kind of like my counterpart, I think I'm gonna stay in my lane with that. But
Boy, y'all sure running them lanes today.
I'm glad he went before me. No, I think when you look at it, and just my opinion too, when you look at it, I worked on the law enforcement side out there on the street, the juvenile justice now, and the corrections. And I think when you really look at it, it's almost like a local level. I don't think it'd be solid at a state level. I think collectively we need to look at putting some pro-social activities inside some of these communities on the local level, and that might drive some of it. I mean, as you can tell, we're seeing the age getting younger and younger as you turn on the news, and so we just got to make sure that we're attacking the gang problem, because I think it is driven by gangs. But then also make sure that they have those tools and resources inside their community to make an honest living. And there's plenty of jobs out there. It's just glorified by different things, outside factors. So,
Thank you, sir.
Judge?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that y'all have done like video hearings for some of the inmates. Is that increasing, or y'all saving more money doing that way, or I guess how much are y'all still doing transportation to courts?
We could probably speak to transportation a little bit, but I will tell you this: when I went to the judges conference about several weeks ago, it was down in Athens. All I heard was praises about the video court from the Superior Court judges. They seem to like it, and I think it's cutting down on the transportation, way down. I'm not sure how many we're still transporting, but if we can facilitate that video court, then we definitely will.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Holcomb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, a statement, comment in terms of we hear constantly about the threat of gangs and the issue of that. I understand it. I understand that it's real. Certainly the allegations against now a former warden taking bribes from gangs is extraordinarily concerning for obvious reasons. I am wondering if more shoes are going to drop, because one would think that if a warden is involved, then certainly other people are probably involved too. So that's one concern, and I'd be curious to hear, besides just cultural issues, what we're going to do to make sure this never happens again, because it cannot happen again. And then secondly, I want to ask some questions about the $25 million for the healthcare again. My understanding is that there's a private contract. I asked about it before, but can't remember the answer on that, of what those increases are for.
Okay. Going back to the situation down at Smith State Prison, can't get into too many details. Still an ongoing situation, but I can confidently say that was isolated to that one prison. And working with the GBI and other federal and state partners, I think that was just, and like I said on the media and the news, I mean, it doesn't stop there. We're going to turn over every rock to make sure that corruption is not within GDC. And looking at that investigation as itself, I can tell you that that's probably where it stops. They're looking at other aspects of it. But if we find out tomorrow that there's other people involved, you have my word that we're going to deal with it accordingly. And I know the GBI is going to deal with it too. They've been a tremendous partner in this investigation. We're going to continue to collaborate in the future to make sure that we weed out any of that. So the possibility of that happening again, it just can't happen. It just can't happen. But I will say this, like I said it again, to Mark Winnie, is that we have to make sure we got to just talk to our people, do a better job talking to people, making sure they don't fall into that gang culture, getting indoctrinated and getting compromised by the gangs. They play by a different set of rules inside the wire, but we can't play in their sandbox either. So we just got to make sure that we're emphasizing that. We have a lot of great men and women that work for GDC that are devastated by it. I mean, they're hurt. I mean, they're very prideful in what they do in their job, and they take their job seriously. And we can't let one or a few bad apples spoil that for the entire agency. But I do not think that it's spread throughout the entire agency. I think it was isolated right there. But again, if it's somewhere else, we're going to find it and we're going to take care of it. And as far as the $25 million for the healthcare costs, that was a private cost, but it's a more stable cost model. So what you have is electronic health records for pharmacy, mental health, and dental. And we expanded mental health throughout all of our prisons. So you have mental health services throughout all where you didn't have it before. And so most of that cost is associated with the vendor WellPath had to bring in their own equipment to help sustain the electronic health record and everything that's involved in that, which is up and running. And they fully implemented the electronic health records within their first year of being awarded the contract.
Okay.
Is the private contract
Comprehensive for all health services?
Yes.
Yeah, we have three primary contracts. WellPath is for physical health,
Mm-hmm.
and then CorrectRx covers pharmacy, and then Centurion MHM covers mental and dental health. So
Okay.
it's three providers.
Okay, thanks.
When you have a population of 52,000, that's pretty substantial. Many who come there with physical and mental needs. I mean, I've heard all kinds of estimates about mental health and prison system running anywhere from 50 to 70% of those that are incarcerated have some type of mental health issue. That's why they're there.
Yes.
As we move on, corrections is a little different than everybody else. They have it's extensive, and we've skipped over a lot of things. But if you could stick with the line items, I'd appreciate it. And I'm going to ask you about a couple more.
Okay.
What about 1954 engineering construction services? I know you're building some new prisons. Increased fund to reflect the opening of the McRae State Prison. Could you go into detail a little bit about that?
Yep. So, as you know, we're repurposing our Lee Arundel facility, and that's that women's prison. We're transferring the women. Once we repurpose that to our TC unit, we're repurposing, transferring those women down to McRae, and so that's to reflect the increase of funds for that to reflect the opening of the McRae Women's Facility, and also the women diagnostic. It's going to be the new diagnostic center for the females as well in the state.
And then when you move over to 1966, it's money in there to maintain the existing operations, the 112-bed Lee Arundel Transition Center. Is that you're going to transition it once they move out? You're going to fix it back up and?
Correct. We're going to maintain the transitional center there at Lee Arundel, as well as the fire station there, and hopefully in the future to expand that bed population for the transitional centers. But that's just making sure we can maintain the transitional centers for 132,000.
Then move it over to 1912-10, increase funds to continue investing in technology projects to improve safety and security. Didn't we just fund a substantial amount of money in the supplemental budget to do that?
Yes, and
I'm sure it's not all inclusive, but I just have a remembrance that we put a lot of money in there for technology.
Yeah, we did. You did. You added additional, I want to say $5 million for technology, and that's going to expand our LPR body scanner, CellSense, and part of that $5 that was additional will go for our drone detection, managed access, and other technology we put inside the prison.
A lot of closed circuit TV, isn't it?
Yeah, CCTV
Right.
footage.
And many people haven't been in prison many, many times. Not incarcerated, but just visiting. Well, I saw you there. But people have no sense of what it's like to be in prison with the open areas. And you got one guard and 50, 60 prisoners out in an open area. When something goes wrong, it's if you don't have some early warning, it's pretty tough to deal with. And
And the technology we're putting in now, especially with our CCTV, is really going to help with that. It's going to help, supplement that officer shortage that we're seeing, to have more eyes and more artificial intelligence, so to speak, to let us know where situations are about to arise before they arise. Hopefully we can get officers over there. So
It also helps with technology and electronic locking systems too, doesn't it?
yes, sir. We're going to try to integrate all of our systems together in the future. That's the ultimate goal.
Judge?
Sorry, back for another round.
No worries.
Back when I was district attorney, about 90% of the cases I handled involved drugs in some way. You still have an RSAT program, is that right?
Correct, we do.
And is it adequately funded?
Let Jay,
Yes, sir, it is. In fact, we just went through an RFP process.
want to go to the podium?
Sure.
Yeah.
Max.
Yes, sir, it is. We have about 2,400 beds in our RSAT program right now, scattered across the inmate and probation population. We just went through an RFP process and awarded to a new vendor out of Chicago in the end of November, and we're currently implementing. They will begin delivering services at some of our facilities in March, and we'll have them transitioned into all facilities by May.
Okay, now I remember as a judge, there were times when the RSAT program was full, and that was part of our negotiation or trying to figure out what to do with somebody coming through drug court. So, I mean, do y'all have an overflow, or do y'all have a way of dealing with these people?
There's very little backlog right now. We've done a pretty good job of keeping those moving through. In addition to what we're talking about, the RSAT program, we have 2 integrated treatment facility programs which do the dual diagnosis, both substance abuse and mental health. So that's also an additional resource on the probation side.
And on the mental health side of it, do you treat it with drugs, and do you have counseling involved as well?
We do have counseling involved. We are implementing the MAT treatment, the medicaid-assisted treatment
Right.
for the opioid addiction. So we're actively involved in that with our healthcare provider, WellPath, as well as our RSAT providers.
Okay. Yeah, I was never very happy about that when I was a judge and we had to do that, but it's trading one drug for another is the way I looked at it, but, okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Any further questions? If not, we appreciate you coming, and we
Thank
do
you.
need to talk a little bit offline.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Private prisons. What page is it? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Jerry Langford with Core Civic. This is Emmanuel Barr with GEO. I appreciate the time, the opportunity to come and speak to you all today. Also want to thank Commissioner Oliver and all of his staff. As you all probably know, we've had a very good, long-standing partnership with the state of Georgia and the Georgia Department of Corrections, so very appreciative for that. Mr. Chairman, understand that time is important, and so I just wanted to get right to the point, and I know that we have discussed this a bit as well, but we're here today to request $5.9 million in our budget line item, and this will go toward pay parity for the Georgia employees at our facilities. Now, these Georgia employees are the same folks that go through the same training that Georgia Department of Correction facility employees go through. They perform the same jobs at our facilities that Georgia Department of Corrections employees do at their facilities. And as you all know, over the last really year or two, as the department has gotten very, very much needed increases to increase pay to recruit and retain employees, though we have gotten a little bit of money in the fiscal year 23 budget, once again, they're getting another much needed pay increase. But with that, there's this pay disparity between what the GDC employees at a facility get paid and what we get paid. And I will tell you that as a company, and I think I speak for GEO as well, even though we haven't received that same funding for parity, recognizing that we have to retain or hire and retain staff, we have increased the pay. And so I think we currently are on par with what GDC is paying their employees simply because we have to. If we don't, we're going to see significant turnover as a result. And so we're really here today just saying, please consider this money so there is pay parity. So when a individual working, an employee working at Wheeler Correctional Facility, for instance, looks across the street, and literally a lot of these facilities are in close proximity, they're not looking down the street and saying, well, gosh, GDC is paying X, and I'm getting Y here. Well, naturally, they're going to go for the higher pay. And the money is going to go in the pockets of those employees and certainly will benefit the communities as well. So that's a simple request. Certainly open to any questions, and I'm going to defer to my colleague here to make some comments as well.
And this may sound like a silly question, but where do you get the money if you come up short?
If we come up short, we just have to pay for it, Mr. Chairman. And I will tell you that in Georgia, we have not received an increase in about 15 years. And again, certainly the department, much deserved, got increases. We got a little bit of money last year, but again, that money went to pay. But especially in this hyper-inflationary environment, as you can imagine, not getting an increase for 15 plus years, and now you're seeing the pay go up, it's putting significant pressure on those facilities.
How many facilities you have at Georgia? In 4?
Yes, sir. We have 3 total. We have one in Jenkins County. We have one in Wheeler County. We also have one in Coffee County.
And GEO has the Riverbend Correctional Facility in Milledgeville.
And in total, I think have about 7,200 inmates.
I'd also like to echo the sentiments of my counterpart from Core Civic. Mr. Chairman, members, and the Commissioner and his team, thank you all for giving us a few moments to speak on this issue. I think it's been, I think it was stated earlier by the Commissioner, the things that impact the GDC employees impact those that work in the correctional facilities that are managed and operated by our 2 companies. The example that we share with Milledgeville, rather Riverbend being in Baldwin County, we're right across the street from Baldwin State Prison. So if there's pay increases that happen in Baldwin, then you have the likelihood of a dynamic where some of our employees might be tempted to go work there. But it isn't just Baldwin County as a potential competitor with pay raises. I know you all have seen this in every industry in the last few years. Inflation, gas, groceries, we all feel it. Certainly our correctional officers and staff feel it as well. So we're asking for the pay parity so that we can at least remain competitive. And the other thing I wanted to mention, unlike a vendor that offers tissue supplies or paper supplies, the work that we offer to the state of Georgia in partnership with the state of Georgia, we're very proud, Core Civic and GEO, I can say that for them, that we're proud of the work that we've been able to have in partnership over the years. But unlike another vendor, we are providing a level of public safety, but we're also offering a level of rehabilitative services for these men and women when they're in these facilities. So they're not just in our facilities, locked away. They're in our facilities receiving job, employment placement, educational programming, cognitive rehabilitative training, things that are going to actually help them be a benefit to society when they leave. So when our staffing gets affected by the economy or by a lack of parity, those things are also affected.
And you pay for that, for the educational benefits and the other services you just spoke to rather than the state of Georgia?
That is correct, sir. That is GEO's commitment to public safety in the great state of Georgia. We make that investment out of our company.
Aren't there several other locations? Doesn't Reedsville have a private prison too?
They do not, Mr. Chairman.
Glenville?
There was a facility in McRae, Georgia, which I believe is very close, but that facility was sold by us to the state. I believe the state is now in the process of putting that facility to use. And there is one other facility that we own and manage in Stewart, and that's a facility we manage in partnership with the federal government.
Isn't the security level lesser in the private prisons than it is in the state prisons?
I would certainly defer to the commissioner and his staff to answer that question, but I would tell you that we certainly do have some tough guys in those facilities. When I heard someone spoke earlier about gangs in facilities, we certainly deal with that as well. But again, we work hand in hand with the commissioner and his team as we work through those issues.
He was shaking his head yes. So,
Okay.
Okay. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for coming. I was listening very closely, and a couple of things occurred. I know that this committee and the House has tried to address this issue. And last year, I started to say wisdom, but that would be a misnomer. It was taken out over in the Senate. So I think we understand the problem. And the part that baffles me probably more than anything is one of our proudest mantras throughout the country is that we are the #1 state to do business in. I had no idea we would punish private business as harshly as we do when it comes to prisons and claim to be the best place to do business. I mean, I don't think it's a shame to make some money. If you got a business and you breaking even, you need to find another way to make a living. You got to make a profit. And we knew that when we engaged private prisons. I don't have a problem with you making a profit if you are doing what you contracted to do. And I haven't heard anything to the contrary yet. But some folk have a real problem with paying you guys. I don't know who they are, but they obviously do a lot of whispering, especially over in the Senate. I think that we've got to, because I can understand you having to retain folk, and you can't do it if they can walk down the street and do better. So thank you all for what you do. I haven't had a chance to be one of your customers, and I'm not looking forward to it, but I'll take your word for what you say happens.
You're certainly welcome to visit.
I will visit.
And we will make sure that you're able to leave at the appropriate time. But
having some good guards with me too.
One of the things, though, that I know this is true of my counterpart, Mr. Langford, we invite people we invite the legislature into our facilities. There's kind of a misnomer even in the term private prison. I often argue there's nothing private about us. We're contractor-operated facilities. So we work on behalf of the state of Georgia. And so when people call us private prisons, I don't know, what the state does as it does its evaluations and auditing. I know I can speak for our company. We have several audits, not just by the state, but we do them internally to make sure that we're honoring the obligations of our contract. And so you're welcome to come visit, and you're always welcome to leave at the appropriate time.
Don't fix me dinner. I had to be brief.
Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Chairman, I want to say too, as a follow-up to Representative Williams' comments, we certainly do appreciate this committee listening and working with us in the past. Certainly do feel that we're heard, certainly do feel that you all understand what we're talking about when we talk about parity. So just want to make sure, say that publicly, how much we do appreciate you all listening to us and working with us on this very, very important issue.
And just for the record, if I remember correctly, last meeting we put in $12 million.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And what did the Senate approve?
We ended up getting $4.3 million last year.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Quite a whack.
So
and that all went to
salaries.
correctional officers specifically at those facilities.
Okay. Judge?
Just so I understand the $5 million that you're talking about, 5.9 million, the 1910-1 shows 948,000, so that's 5.9 million in addition to.
No, sir, and that's a good question. And so that would just be for that line item, 5.9 million would be the ask. And so you're correct in that there's 948 in there, so it would be just, call it just shy of 5 million. But
Okay.
that would be the total for that line item. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I'm like Representative Williams. I don't know how you do business without being receiving enough money to even fund the officers.
It's a
Something.
difficult climate, as I mentioned previously. It isn't just the ability to walk across the street to another facility. It's the ability to go to Target. It's the ability to go to McDonald's in some cases. We want to make sure that our officers are competitive so that they can take care of their families like the rest of us.
And I'm certain that everybody is not a fan of private prisons, and some of them wish the state would take it all over. But I think we would spend a lot more money if we had to build new prisons to staff and in the state level. And I think that's the reason we went to private prisons to begin with. Is we couldn't fund it and employ the people that it would take to fund it, to put them all over.
Yes, sir. And we're, again, very appreciative for the partnership. I know we, CoreCivic, have been in partnership with the state for almost 25 years now, and I believe GEO has for maybe 10 plus. So very appreciative for the partnership.
Number 27, is that Chairman?
Thank you, Chairman, and sorry I was late. As you may or may not have discussed, my warden was the one that was arrested this weekend, so I've had a lot of meetings this morning. And that happened within 3 weeks of a new commissioner, so kind of sends a message he means business. And anyway, a couple of comments, and Chairman actually kind of teed that up. If you're against private prisons, that tells me you haven't visited one. Is it not true your recidivism rate is better than the state? The amount of education that those inmates receive is unbelievable. The vocational training is more than the state. So the argument, there was an argument, you closed the state ones before you were the private prisons, but literally in Milledgeville you could walk across the street and and this committee's position has always been to try to make parity, and I hope this committee finds the will to do that, and again we did despite the Senate's efforts. But I publicly want to thank the Commissioner for what he's done and for what y'all are doing, because just the training in the vocational area alone has made a difference in the lives of the inmates. And echo what y'all said, if you haven't visited one, you certainly need to. And I, again, apologize for being late. Thank you.
And you're absolutely correct. When you get out of prison, you're a convicted felon. You try and get a job. If you don't have a skill, there's not everybody's going to be willing to take that risk. Vocational training is really a positive aspect of what both the public and private prisons do.
Can I say, make one more? So I appreciate that supportive comment. Again, in partnership with the great state of Georgia and the commissioner and his team, we don't view ourselves in competition with recidivism for GDC. We view ourselves, and I can speak for CoreCivic in this moment, as a complement to GDC. So what we do in recidivism reduction affects all of Georgia. It affects all of the people who are leaving the prison system. And I always remind people, it is one prison system. There is not a private prison system and a public prison system. It is one prison system, and we are here to complement what the commissioner and his team are offering through our recidivism reduction programming. And I do agree, if you've never visited one of our facilities, that door is wide open.
And we all know what happens to somebody when they get out of prison. They can't get a job. They're back before long. So.
But in Georgia, Mr. Chairman, people who leave the prisons that we manage and operate have up to 18 months of support from a specific caseworker who helps them with employment, helps them with jobs, helps them with resumes. If they're getting a construction job, it helps them buy tools, buy boots, buy clothing, get housing, and all of that is without being an added cost to the state. So again, being in partnership with GEO and CoreCivic offers a great complement to reduce recidivism for all of Georgia's prison system and not one or the other.
Is that only in the private system, or does the public system provide that caseworker too?
I can't speak to the state.
Representative Williams?
There was a time that the state supplied a lot of the things that you're now supplying, and the politics got twisted, and everybody decided that no longer did you need a book, but a baseball bat. And a lot of these programs were left. I'm certainly glad you brought them back, because it's proven that it's just cheaper to keep a person out of jail than to be caught up in the recidivism thing. And like the chairman said, if they don't have any skills that were developed when they were incarcerated, sometimes they have quite a while, they can go all the way up to a PhD. If they don't have any skills, they will be back. They will be back. And I've never understood the politics of a few years ago. Governor Deal started addressing it, and it certainly helped a lot.
And Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind me adding, I know we certainly follow the department's lead, work very closely with Mr. Sanders in the department and his staff, who works on those academic educational programs within the facilities. And so we really do fall under their umbrella and follow his team's lead. And where there are opportunities to enhance those programs, usually that is at the urging of the department. Can you all do X, Y, and Z? Representative Williams, you mentioned Governor Deal, and a couple of years ago, they put on the table for diesel mechanic and welding facilities to be built at some of the private facilities. So we ended up building those at our Coffee and Wheeler facilities and have seen great success with individuals getting a training that would allow them to get out and get a very well-paying job. I think that is going to be the key. And again, that was all driven by the department and us following their lead to implement that. So very appreciative again to them for leading and allowing us to partner with them on that.
Okay, I think we probably overextended our time, but a lot of good answers, and we appreciate what you do.
Yes, sir. Thank
you, Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Thank you.
And we had left an item off the agenda, so we're going to call them up now, the County Correctional Institutes. We have somebody here from, okay. County Prisons, County Correctional Institutes.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow committee members, for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My name is Gabriel Carter. I'm representing the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia, representing all 159 counties. I'll be brief. I'll just say, Mr. Chairman, I did have a handout. At the appropriate time, I would love to provide this to you all. And I'll briefly address a comment you made earlier about the 1 to 3 years. I wanted to clarify that was a county correctional institution, which traditionally houses state prisoners for a longer duration than county jails. So I just want to make that clarification. And secondly, that's self-reported data, so we'll have to work with the department to clarify any confusion if necessary on the data. So again, I represent all 159 counties, and some of the things that we're hearing from county commissioners are about the expenses and just increased costs in general of housing all prisoners, but specifically state prisoners as well. So right now, I think as it was mentioned, for state prisoners housed at county jails, they receive $30 a day in per diem, and state prisoners housed at county correctional institutions receive $22 a day. And what we're asking for is just an increased cost from $30 to $40 for county jails, and from $22 to $32. Sorry, from $22 to $30 for the county CIs. Again, with the rising cost of inflation, there's increased costs in goods and services, food, all the supplies that's necessary to take care of state prisoners. So just asking you all to take that into consideration, and that's what we're requesting of the of this committee, so that that financial burden doesn't fall on local governments and local taxpayers when that increased burden. It just asks you all to take into consideration inflation and things such as that nature. And if that cost may be too steep for the committee, I would love to work with you all to see if we can come up with a number that may be more amenable to this committee. Thank you for your time.
Do you have any idea how long it's been since that's been upgraded? I know it's just the last couple of years you went up $2 on the counties, but
Yes.
before that,
I don't know, but before that, I know it hasn't been increased since the pandemic. So with all the, increased costs that we're seeing now, hasn't reflected that increase in general cost of goods.
do you have any idea about the actual cost of what it takes to maintain a prisoner?
So one of the things that I provided in this handout was just a few examples. It's just wanted to pluck a few examples from different counties that reported data to us. And one of the things that they said is the amount to house the state prisoner is well above what we're receiving in per diem. We're not asking for that complete cost to be matched, but just increasing it to better reflect what it actually costs for a county to house one of these state prisoners. And I've provided a couple examples of county jails and county correctional institutions. So it differs per county, but they're all well above what they receive in per diem.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's interesting. You were going real good, then you started wanting to shuffle and deal at the end of your presentation. One of the things that I've seen these costs, and we've been seeing them, and anybody that has not heard from one of their county commissioners will end up swallowing this cost. And I never knew when it was at $20, was it, Chairman? I never knew how we could afford to even entertain that. And at some point, we're going to have to stop passing through these costs to county government and get a realistic number. There is a big difference between an urban jail and a rural jail. And and there's some counties that need the money. Y'all did right. We might could move some urban prisoners down. Could be a pretty good little new industry. On some of these places, they closed some of the schools the day that they opened a new facility in Jenkins County. So there are some possibilities here. But we're going to have to address this, and a couple of dollars here and a couple of dollars there. It's not going to get it because counties had to absorb this great inflation spike too. It's just expensive to keep pace.
Thank you, Representative Williams. I appreciate that comment.
Do we have any other questions? Thank you for coming today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Sure. Next up's the GBI. Well, maybe. There they are. There they are.
I'm just sending it so that I'll get to it.
Chairman, we skipped DJJ.
How do I do that?
It was intentional, I know.
No, we'll come back to them after the GBI. Welcome. We're ready when you are. Did you hear my commentary at the beginning?
I did not.
We've been asked to ask certain questions, and I don't know whether you have them now, but we like to get them. And there are 5 of them. Does the money included in the proposed budget for the 2000 COLA adequately fund that for all your agency? It's the first one. Second, and we can give you a copy of this later on. I think tomorrow when we hold hearings, I'm going to run a copy for every department head or every agency so that they can fill them out independently and give them back. But what is the head count for your agency? How many vacancies do you have? What's your turnover rate? Do you have any capital needs that aren't funded? And do you collect any fees that cover the operations of your department that we don't appropriate? If so, what are they, how much, and what are they used for? Certainly we understand from our supplemental budget about the GCIC and the gun permitting and what an impact that's had on your budget.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for having us here this afternoon, and all the other committee members. We appreciate what you do for the state, and we appreciate the support you give law enforcement. The first item is, let me get my glasses on.
And you can, all these ones with an S there in front of them that are universal to all agencies, you can skip over those unless you have something that needs specific addressing.
Now, I think the first one is the increased funds, 2,000. I just wanted to say, hey, thank you for the $2,000 COLA. Certainly, every little bit helps us in our recruiting and also our retention. The second item, the 30.5.6, provide funds for our investigative case management system. We're very appreciative of that. As you know, it's 20 years old, and it needs to be replaced to help us be more efficient and more effective. And the other thing, in the amended budget, I wanted to say thanks for the $3.5 million in the amended FY23 for our user fees. And of course, that's one of the questions, and we'll be, sending some more information up about that. But this is an ongoing issue, the user fees that we identified, and we've been working very vigorously with OPB to get some standardized numbers. But I can tell you that we have seen a downward trend in the user fees to the point of about 3.5, 3.6 impact this fiscal year and a possible 4.6 approximate for next year. But we'll continue to work with OPB on that.
Yeah, I was wondering if you thought that was going to increase once the word gets out that, and I think it's out now, that you don't have to get a background investigation for a gun permit anymore. So that was a substantial hit. I didn't realize it had the effect that it did.
When you look back, and Connie Buck, our CFO, is with me, but when you look back and prior to July 1st, we saw user fees somewhere around 900,000 to 1.2 million. After the first quarter of the current fiscal year, we saw it start to trend downward. Right now, we're looking at approximately 700,000 as the average. And the last check, I think we trended down another 53,000. I don't know if she has any more current information about that, sir. But that not only has caused an issue this year, but next fiscal year. And of course, the user fees are so important for us because we fund 114 positions with those user fees.
And that's it. Any questions? I got a question. You may be a little reticent to answer, but you may or may not know what's coming. But some of the people around the state are very concerned, particularly in one area, about long-term cases that haven't been solved. And I've been approached by a lot of people about whether or not the GBI would be thinking a wise investment to staff a cold case unit. I know that you don't have one, and it would probably take 10, 12, 14 agents to probably run that, but and there's a lot of time involved. And of course, my wife watches all the detective crime shows, and she's a big advocate, but I get tired. I've been involved in law enforcement all my life. I get a little tired of watching some of that stuff, but I don't have much alternative because she loves it. But and I know exactly what kind of position I'm putting you in. So I just if that was to occur, you wouldn't be adverse to it.
I would not be adverse. I think that every case is important, whether you call it a cold case or a current case. It's important because, as we believe in the GBI, that we're an advocate for every victim, that we are involved in investigation. I will tell you that as you look at our cases and our workload increase, you see certain things like child exploitation in the last 3 years, 18% increase. And we see an increase in a lot of our investigations. And so every case is important to us, but we have to prioritize. And when other information comes up, I can assure you that we go back. But I also see the value in having individuals there that take a continuous look at past cases.
And it takes a special kind of investigator to look at that. I mean, you have to really be determined and read and read and read to try and I won't go there. But I'm also glad to see that you're asking for another position for the rape kits to make sure that, and I know Representative Holcomb, who initiated all that, has done a great job, and from my understanding, all the rape cases, all the rape kits have been processed. That there's no longer a backlog, and
we
except for the
yes,
the
yes,
backlog that
yes, sir.
is routinely incurred.
Yes,
I mean, as they
yes,
come
sir.
in.
Yes, sir.
Right. Any other questions? Okay, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
In my mind's a lot of places today, and apparently I've skipped over the Department of Juvenile Justice, so I hate to. I see them sitting out there. And
His wife has intimidated him about the cold case.
how are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Mr.
Oh.
Chairman, members of the committee? So I will start with our agency head count, which is 3,412. We have 2,402 filled positions and 1,010 vacant positions. The overall agency vacancy is 30%. And obviously, we are in a similar situation as the Department of Corrections, but I think with us, what we see with our JCO 1s and 2s is obviously that's where we're also losing individuals. With the young people, not to make excuses, but with reform, we have a much tougher population. What we've seen over the last year is that we've been able to do a better job recruiting. Now we've got to figure out how to do a better job retaining. So we have some things that we'll work on internally to include really trying to speak with the staff that we are retaining to get information from them to see what is it that's making them, what's the right formula for them that maybe we can look at when we're recruiting and onboarding staff.
What's your retention rate? If I remember correctly, it was worse than Department of Corrections last couple of years.
Yes, it is. So our turnover rate, and it still is, our turnover rate for our JCO 1 and 2s is 95%.
That's what I thought. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I hadn't talked to some of them, but I'm going to send a copy of this out to all the agencies that have been here so far and let them fill it out so that we have an accurate representation of actually the information that we want.
Okay. So I wanted to make sure with the other questions that you asked, I think we're good on those. So based on your direction, I'll jump into the budget document.
Okay.
All righty. I will start with, we're on page 17, 31.1.5, 31.3.5, 31.4.5. And this increased funds to adjust the state-based salary schedule to increase the salaries for the certified teachers by $2,000 effective September 1, 2023. And as you all know, we are the 181st school district. The next thing we have is 31.36, 31.46, and this is to utilize existing funds to implement required teacher step increases, which is a requirement. We're not asking for anything. We're going to self-fund that, and the total for that is $102,624 that we will self-fund.
But that's mandated by, they
Yes.
get the same
For all
old merit
teachers.
system scale that regular teachers get.
Yes,
Right.
sir. And the last thing that I have is 31.37 and 31.4.7, and that's to utilize existing funds to establish a juvenile correctional officer 3 rank, to hopefully help with recruitment and retention as well. And we're able to self-fund that at the tune of $957,755.
How do you self-fund it? Is that from vacant positions?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that is all that I have, and I will pause for any questions.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you yet, but you'll get used to me.
I wouldn't guarantee that.
With the 95% turnover, it's no use learning anybody's first name because you won't know.
So that's very true, but we're hoping to turn that around. We don't have a choice. And so I think what you all saw with my predecessor is the fact that he came in, started looking at the culture of our agency, and that's the work that we've done up to this point. And moving forward, we now get to focus in on issues like the turnover rate for our JCOs. We also think that with some other things that we can put in place to make people feel safe when they're there, to try to make sure that we also are giving them the training that they need. So we're looking at all of those opportunities and to see if we can build up. Then we also can have more than one person working on a housing pod, and all of those things will help us. But we just have to take it step by step to try to build up to that.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. I asked the Commissioner Commissioner Oliver, and I'll ask you, please prepare a cost of turnover. It's available, but for some reason, it's like chasing a cat in state government to get that simple question answered. Got a lot of budget analysts, got folk all over the place with titles. Ask one of them to come up with what it costs you, your turnover cost is to you. And it's unbelievable, 95%. I'll be very frank with you, I've never seen a 95% turnover rate. It's going to be interesting to see. Maybe a little sadder than interesting. What's your starting pay for your officers?
With JCO ones, we start at $37,730.
Okay. It used to sound all right, but truck drivers started about 100,000.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know how you maintain
I don't know.
an organization with 95% turnover rate. I mean, not only do you lose money, you lose experience and competency. I mean, dealing with youthful offenders is takes a while for people to understand what's going on there. And
Yes.
and I know gangs are a problem in the juvenile facilities too. And,
Yes, it is.
What about youth competency beds? Didn't we fund some of those a couple of years ago? And
yes, you did.
do you need more or
Right now in fiscal year 2023, we have about 10 beds that we're contracting for, and we're projecting to have those 10 beds in fiscal year 2024 as well.
What kind of beds were those, Chairman, you're talking about?
you want to explain to him what kind of?
Yeah, what you say, explain the bed deal. So 10 ain't many in the size of your organization, but go ahead, I want to know why.
These are for juveniles who need to be, they're placing these beds for to determine if they can stand trial.
They've been deemed
Incompetent.
Incompetent.
And yes, and so what this will do is give them the opportunity to be in a bed to see whether or not we can get them whether or not the treatment will help them be competent enough to actually go to trial.
The average stay on one of those beds.
I'm sorry.
Average stay for one of those beds, how long?
Until they're deemed competent.
And that usually takes how long? You got anybody? I know they stay longer than the COs. So
we'll get you that question.
Not a good way, but a way.
And that's all that we have, Mr.
Oh,
Chairman.
I thought he had a question. I was
I
waiting on
did
that.
have a question. Weren't you taking down what I asked where you could answer it at some point?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. All right. I thought, I said, wow, boy, he ain't going to say nothing else. I was trying to wait you out, and the chairman broke in.
Okay, if there are no more questions, that's all we have. We appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
Next is CJCC. There he is. It is. I don't. Okay. Did you hear me speak to the questions?
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
And I just reiterated a little while ago, I think we're just going to run some copies and give you a copy and let you fill them out so we have an accurate account of every agency, not just what I'm writing down here.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll go ahead and give you the answers,
Okay.
but we're happy to fill that out when we get it as well. The COLA raises are not fully funded. We have an impact from the $5,000 raise last year of $890,924. We appreciate the add from the House in the amended budget to cover the victims' compensation side of that. But the total fund, fully funded, will be $890,924. For the $2,000 raise in FY24, that's another $356,367 for that 2,000 raise in fiscal year 24. We have 136 positions, 7 of which are vacant. We are actively trying to fill those 7 positions. It is not easy to fill positions sometimes for a couple reasons. One is being able to find qualified applicants. Another is, for example, a position that we just put an offer out a few weeks ago was a position that was posted $46,000 to $50,000 salary range, and during the interview process with the candidate, we talked about that. And when we issued the letter of offer, they came back and asked for 71. So those kind of things happen. But we're working on trying to fill those 7 positions. Our turnover rate has consistently been about 8 to 10%. And we do have some fees that we collect, some probation fines, other fees that are collected for crime victims comp. We gave you a pretty comprehensive breakdown on that. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, but I think what we've given you probably answers any questions you might have about the impact to our crime victims emergency fund based on the loss of those fees and fines. Looking at our budget for fiscal year 24, there is 30.6.1, the 2000 cost of living adjustment, which we've just talked about. We appreciate what is in there, but we do need another $356,000 to fully fund. There's also a position to administer the sexual assault kit tracking system in accordance to House Bill 255 from the 2021 session. That ad is $94,250. We appreciate the Governor's Office of Plan and Budget for including that in our budget. This is a pretty important position for us to be able to make sure that the sexual assault kit tracking system is functioning fully. We have now about 400 agencies that are accessing and utilizing that system. There are hundreds more that are not in compliance, and this position would be one that would be primarily responsible in the necessary training to get those other agencies on board and to ensure going forward that all the agencies that need to be involved with our sexual assault kit tracking system is involved as they should be.
Is that an electronic system?
It is a web-based system that allows, when a kit is utilized, it is scanned into the system. by the provider that does the forensic medical exam. That kit's tracked along the way. When law enforcement picks it up, they'll scan it in that they have it. As it is sent to GBI will scan in that they have it. That will allow a victim to be able to go online and they can see exactly where their kit is in the process.
Great.
To just give you a little bit of information about our agency, we are very involved in a number of things: sexual assault, domestic violence, child advocacy centers, court-appointed special advocates, victim advocates in the district attorney's office are where a lot of our victim assistance money goes. We have a significant investment in each of those organizations. I think the involvement, we're proud of the involvement that we have and the work that is being accomplished as a result of our victim assistance division and our work with our partners. You mentioned to GBI about the code case, for example. We've been able to establish a.
You going to fund it?
No, but we do have in the Metro Atlanta area. We do have a sexual assault cold case initiative that we've been working for several years. The ability
you provide
now,
funds for that.
We do that is
Right,
funded
grant.
through our agency, and we provide technical assistance, and we actually have a staff member that's pretty involved in those. As a matter of fact, I had the opportunity last week to sit down with the sheriff in Oconee, and we were looking over a cold case from 1988 with the sheriff there in Oconee. That's a very important work, and with the advancements in technology as we have now, I applaud the GBI, I applaud the governor, applaud you all for being involved in that. We've seen some incredible successes through the code case work that we're doing, and there's no doubt a lot of victims out there that could receive a significant amount of peace, potentially, just knowing that something's been resolved. And obviously there are offenders out there that need to be held accountable, and we're proud to be able to have been a part of that and look forward to seeing Georgia expand that going forward. Let me just share with you a little bit about our investment with sexual assault, domestic violence, child advocacy, and court-appointed special advocates. For the domestic violence shelters, there's a total funding that comes through our agency of about $35 million a year to our domestic violence shelters. Almost $13 million of that is state appropriated. About $22 million of it is through the federal funds that we're able to secure and distribute to our domestic violence shelters.
But they're decreasing every year, aren't they? The federal funds?
Those federal funds are decreasing dramatically every year. As a matter of fact, the amount of decrease of those federal funds has been significant for the last couple of years, and we've been able the last couple of years to offset that with some supplemental funding through ARPA and coronavirus special, the CSEF funds from the first year of coronavirus. We're anticipating by fiscal year 24 and 25 that there will be a 50% reduction in those federal funds to domestic violence shelters. Sexual assault centers, we have a federal investment of about $11.1 million. A state investment of about $1.5 million. In addition to that, there's about $1.7 million that we fund through the Crime Victims Emergency Fund to go toward the forensic medical exams. All of our sexual assault centers, except for two, have forensic the sexual assault nurse examiners on staff and do the forensic exams there. About $1.7 million goes to those centers through the forensic medical exams.
But it's tough in this environment when you're using your money for the Crime Victims Emergency Fund to pay salaries to do the other things that you're supposed to be doing.
We pay $1,000 per exam on the forensic medical exams. Most of our sexual assault centers tell us that that's not enough to pay for their costs, but at least offsets some of their costs. So a total funding of $15.8 for sexual assault centers. Child advocacy centers, we pay about, and by the way, the reductions that we anticipate in those sexual assault centers, I believe, was 47% over the next 2 years. I'm pulling this up to make sure I've got that correct. 43% over the next 2 fiscal years. Child advocacy centers, we fund at $10.7 million in federal funds. The Child Advocacy Centers and the Court Appointed Special Advocates is funded differently on a state appropriated level. Their funding goes through the Department of Human Services, and that money is then passed through to their member association, and the member association distributes that money to the centers. And we're not sure what that state fund is, so I can't give you the breakdown.
But even with that, most of the KESA people are volunteers, the ones that actually do the work.
That's exactly right. And the CASA funding that we pass along on federal funds is about $6.9 million. We anticipate a 48% reduction in federal funding for child advocacy centers and a 46% decrease in federal funding for the CASA programs over the next 2 fiscal years. And with that, I will answer any questions. By the way, we do have Taylor and the folks from the Council of Accountability Court judges with us. They're part of our they are attached to our agency, and you have them on the agenda along with us. They are here if you want to speak to them in just a moment. But I'll answer any questions you all may have, or at least attempt to.
I don't see any, but Representative Williams has left us. Here we go. Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make sure that I understand your comment about the 40% reduction in sexual assault centers and other services that you have over the next few years. What does that mean in terms of the budget allocation now? Is there a diminution in the ability to provide services over fiscal year 24, and then it looks like we're heading for a cliff for 25 and 26? Is that correct?
I think that's probably a pretty fair assessment based on what is happening on the federal level. We've seen a 67% decrease in the VOCA funds, and we were able to supplement that with the ARPA funds and the CSEF funds over the last couple of years. But we're in a position to where there's going to be some reductions this year with the awards that we're able to grant to our sub-grantees, and I would anticipate that we will exhaust our reserves pretty much. Even doing that, and next year we'll have to have another significant reduction unless something happens on the federal level that federal crime victim emergency fund has a significant recovery. It is basically going to be zeroed out with the allocations that we're getting this year, though.
I'd be curious in the dollar figure number that we would need to potentially boost for the sexual assault centers to make sure that we don't have any decline in services at any point of the year. I think we've made significant investments in trying to address that. I'd still like the incidence of violence to go down, and I'm disappointed that it hasn't. But that said, we have to make sure that we take care of our victims along the way, and I'd be very concerned if we don't have the ability to do that for the rest of this fiscal year.
There's a funding formula report that we did in response to language in the budget a couple years ago. I'm sure you've seen that report. And in this report, one of the things that we did is we identified the amount of funds that it would take for domestic violence shelters and sexual assault centers to be able to perform the state certified, what they are required to do to be state certified, just that minimum level of service they're required to provide to be state certified. And those figures are $44 million a year in domestic violence and $12.5 million roughly a year in sexual assault. It would be a significant appropriations to get to that level. Both domestic violence and sexual assault do more than just is required. Some of our shelters and centers do a lot more than that floor or that minimum requirement, and all of them do more. I don't think we have any of them that are just doing the bare minimum and not doing more. And the reason is because they're victim-centered agencies that are looking out for the victims in their communities. And They have a passion for that. They raise money locally so that they can provide local funds as well. We try to help them position themselves better to where they can raise additional funds locally. We have a strategic a person on our staff that helps the boards with their strategic planning and fundraising. We'd love to see some more diversification, especially with some of those centers. But it's difficult, especially in those rural areas, to be able to raise those funds.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can have just one more question. I focused, and I tend to myopically focus on the issue of sexual assault, but with respect to domestic violence shelters, are they looking at the same potential cliff in fiscal year 25 and 26
Yes.
as well?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely. Domestic violence, sexual assault, child advocacy centers.
All of them.
Court-appointed special advocates, victims advocates in the district attorney's offices. All of those are heavily funded from federal grants, and there's going to be significant cuts in the next couple of years.
All right. Thank you.
But my experience with these is it's not unusual. The federal government gives you large grants, and then from year to year they seem to decrease it and hope that the state or whoever is going to pick up.
So this grant comes out of the Crime Victims Emergency Fund on a federal level. It's not an appropriation that is determined by just the desire of Congress or the desire of the president. It is a fund that is driven by white collar crime fines and fees that go into the fund, and those collections have been decreasing over the last number of years to the point to where this year's allocation zeroes out that Crime Victims Emergency Fund on a federal level. So we're depending on some white collar crime to be aggressively pursued over the next couple of years in order to help us build that back up and hopefully be in a position that we can continue to fund our partners on these local levels.
Judge Gunner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my concern is mainly with the CACs and the forensic interviews that they provide, which are essential for some of the trial work that the DAs do. When this cliff comes around, I mean, how much money are we going to have to replace if the state chooses to do that?
If the state chooses to do that, of course, that's a policy decision that's way above my pay grade. If the state chooses to do that, and the collections on the federal level stay consistent with what they've been for the last couple of years, I would say you're probably looking in the neighborhood of probably $30 million would be my guess. I don't know if I think Stephen may be texting Christie to see if we've got a better answer. But I think it's going to be in that $30 to $40 million range if you want to fully replace that.
Forensic interviews are paid out of that.
Forensic interviews, by the way, are paid out of the Crime Victims Emergency Fund. We pay $200 for a forensic interview. So the interview itself will be covered through the Crime Victims Emergency Fund. The issue that you're speaking of would be, are those child advocacy centers going to be funded adequately enough to where you're still going to have the same level of presence of the child advocacy centers? But the forensic interview itself is paid out of our victims comp program.
But those fees don't actually pay the salary of the interviewer.
No,
Yeah.
we pay about $3 million a year probably in forensic interviews altogether around the state. But no, they don't. Absolutely don't.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions? We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. The accountability courts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Judge Lawton Stevens from Athens. I preside over the Western Circuit Felony Drug Court there. Seated beside me is our Executive Director of the Council of Accountability Court Judges, Taylor Jones. Seated behind me is Tom Cole from Savannah, who presides over a family treatment court over there. And we appreciate y'all letting us talk to y'all today. We appreciate all the support that we have gotten from y'all in the past for our accountability courts. And it's particularly an honor for me to see a man that I served in the legislature with many years ago, Representative Alan Powell. And I had the honor of serving with him, and also had the honor of serving as a judge alongside Representative Gunner, who also presided over felony drug court in his circuit. Having listened to Commissioner Nail's presentation, I'd like to brag on the DCS officers that are our team members in our felony drug courts. They do a great job. They provide supervision for felony probationers in the Veteran Treatment Court and the Western, and also the felony drug courts. Also, we work hand in hand with the Department of Corrections. And a lot of our job is to make sure that if we have nonviolent offenders who we can treat for their addictions, alcoholism or drug addiction, then they might not end up in the state prison, so that the violent offenders can have a space and actually spend longer time, because these are the dangerous people that we need to be incarcerated. There are a yellow folder in front of you with a bunch of information about how important accountability courts have been, how successful they've been. And Representative Gunner, you mentioned the medical assistance treatment program, and I was like you. When I first started, I thought, well, no, this is abstinence-based. We're not going to trade one drug addiction for another. But they've really made great strides in trying to treat opioid addiction. And so that's something that it's just a hard thing to crack, is an opiate addiction, if you'll pardon my term. Hard thing to heal, I guess I should have said. But medically assisted, if you're supervised and you take something, Suboxone or something like that, and then get weaned off that, we've had a lot of success in where before it was just like knocking your head against a wall. But the Council of Accountability Court Judges was created in 2015 by the state legislature. Provides a framework for all the other accountability courts in the state. It sets standards and rules and certification for accountability courts that are in state court, superior court, juvenile court, covers all those. We have felony drug courts are under our supervision, mental health courts, veteran treatment courts, DUI courts, and family treatment courts. And if you look at that information in your folder, you'll see how successful we've been in saving taxpayers money and trying to keep our communities safe, but most importantly, saving lives. And that's why I'll tell you, when I first became an accountability court judge 11 years ago, it's really changed. It's changed the way that I behave as a judge. It's changed my perspective, and it's the best thing that I do. And I think Representative Gunner, I know we've talked about this on numerous occasions. So to answer y'all's questions is our expert, Taylor Jones. So she's ready to answer those 5 questions, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Judge Stevens, and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I think we've got 5 to address. We have a staff of 13 that serve 183 accountability court programs in our state. And I'll just go ahead and say that since fiscal year 13, between the end of fiscal year 22, our accountability courts have served 32,034 participants. Of those 13 positions, I don't have a retention percentage to share with you, but I can tell you since 2015, I've had 4 staff members leave me. 2 went to go work in accountability courts locally in a director position. 1 went back to school, and 1 took a position with the federal government at the end of November. So we have 13 positions. We've had 4 people leave us. I have 1 vacancy right now. It was the young lady that left at the end of November to pursue that federal position. Been trying to fill it since that time, and hopefully we'll be interviewing some folks soon. The statewide spreads do cover the current employees on this side of our budget. We do not collect any fees through our office, and we don't have any capital request. But as we kind of start to close out, I would like to highlight some of our current FY23 work for you today. With your support, we were able to start 11 new accountability courts this fiscal year. We continue to see our census rebound from the pandemic. In FY23, this first quarter, we collect data quarterly. We've served 100 more participants than we did in FY22 in the same quarter, and we're expecting to see those trends continue. With your support, we were able to hire additional case managers to support participants and also to provide supervision. And again, none of these recent accomplishments would have been possible without this committee. And we just are thankful for your support to be able to improve public safety by reducing recidivism rates for these nonviolent offenders. As we wrap up, I just want to highlight some of our performance, continue to highlight some of our performance measures, and it's included in the folder before you in the nice yellow folder. That accountability court participants continue to be ones that commit offenses related to their substance use disorder or severe and persistent mental illness. They are not those charged with gang-related activity, sex crimes, or that have a serious violent history. Last year in FY22, we served 2,758 new participants. We performed 393,730 drug screens. Of those, 92% were negative. Our most recent recidivism analysis looked at 28,400 Georgia Accountability Court participants. And the rearrest rate, as an example of this study, for an adult mental health court participant 3 years post-completion is a low rate of 26%. And in contrast, when you look at the Georgia Prisoner Reentry Study of 2014, an offender with similar characteristics had a rate of 60 to 81% recidivism rate 3 years post-release. We continue to be more cost-effective. Hopefully that's displayed and that information is in that folder for you. But for every state dollar invested in accountability courts in FY22, there was $4.20 saved. Also within your folder, we updated our economic impact study this year with the Carl Vinson Institute of Government. And we have found that it actually increased from when we did it in 2017, that each graduate from one of our adult courts produces $25,921 in economic benefits to our state. We had 1,592 folks graduate last year, so we're estimating that total to be right at $41 million. So again, we thank you for your support. We're happy to answer questions and provide any additional information. I don't know if Judge Stevens or Judge Cole has anything to add.
Judge Gunner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As to the MATs, I was still on the drug court in our jurisdiction, and MATs were just starting to come out, so I had those feelings about it back then. And that was also around the time that I shifted from drug court over to mental health court, yes, and then I left the bench. So right, I'm glad to hear that treatment has gotten more standard and better.
It has, and it depends upon, you've got to have them in a program, right? You got to have them making sure that they're employed, making sure they're going to counseling, making sure they're going to group therapy, making sure that they're supervised as far as where they go, and stay away from people, places, and things that get them in trouble. But as long as you have that structure, then we've been able to have some success in getting people weaned off of opioids, and that's it, and all you got to do is pick up the paper and see all the number of people who die from opioid overdoses. Most of the time now it's like laced with fentanyl, or it might be just straight fentanyl that's coming up a lot. But we have had more success. Like I said, I was just like you. I was like, well, why are we going to put them on methadone? They're just going to get addicted to methadone. But no, we've been able to kind of get beyond that medically.
And a follow-up, since the courts have come in, and your participant rate, I guess, is still growing as the number of courts grow, but how's the health of the courts that are operating right now? And that comes from my experience in my circuit, where we started having a drop-off because the DA was resistant and the public defender's office were resistant to it.
Well, of course, we had COVID, and that was a kind of a tough situation to get through, because we had our meetings on video, virtual meetings, and didn't get to meet face to face. And part of addiction is, you become isolated. That's a trigger that gets you kind of wanting to go back and use again. So we had that struggle. But I can't really speak to statewide, but we've had the same situation in my court. You got to have somebody. You got to have a person with a designee for the team from the district attorney's office that's diligent and wants to get people in the program. You got to have the law enforcement that are screening some of these folks to see whether or not they would benefit from the program, then they got to be clinically eligible and legally eligible, because like Taylor was saying, we don't take violent offenders. You know, you're not going to get somebody with domestic violence going to be coming into your program, or you're not going to get a drug dealer coming into your program. So we still have those challenges. But as far as the overall health, I think could be reflected in the fact that we're opening new programs. And, you know, we're getting the word out that these programs work, and people are getting behind them in their local communities. So
yeah, I just want to say that you know, probably the best thing I did while on the bench was adoptions, and
yeah,
these courts were the second best thing I did.
Absolutely. I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Adoptions and weddings.
Yeah.
Much better than
I tried to stay away from
divorces and
those.
custody cases. Yeah. I kind of get the idea why you became a state representative. So.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned differences in recidivism rates, which is something that we hear a lot about. To what do you ascribe the differences in terms of those outcomes?
Well, from my perspective, it's because, you know, when we have a graduation, you know, they've been there for 18 to 24 months, and they've had a job, they've reconnected with their family, you know, they're not using anymore. They're nowhere to go they go to community support meetings regularly. They meet with counselors. They have a network. They've developed all that. And almost to a person, if you ask somebody at graduation, hey, what are you going to do next? They say, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because I've learned the skills of how to maintain my sobriety. And it's not just by not using. I mean, that's just the basic fact of it. It's a completely life-changing thing that they go through in this program. So, in my opinion, the reason they don't recidivate as much or reoffend is because they've got a stake in society. They're back with their children, for instance. They're back with their family. They've earned the trust of their family members and their colleagues at work, and so they want to keep that going. And so, from my perspective, not talking about statistics, but that's why it works.
I'm curious in terms of scale. Where are we in terms of the state of those that would benefit from these programs, but they're not available in their locations? Because that bothers me as a person, that depending on where you are, you may get the help that you need to get on a better path, and those that don't have it don't have that ability, and they may just wind up sitting in jail, which doesn't seem to be doing anybody much good if you have programs to help move them in a different direction.
Yeah, we take my coordinator will go out to the jail and talk to people and try to promote the program. And a lot of times, you know, you get some rejection, you get some feedback from people that are in confinement. Some of them they're saying, man, don't go to drug court, man, that's hard. You know, they're going to hold you accountable. They're going to make you screen, and if you screen dirty, you're going to go to jail for 24 hours. And so that's, you know, it's not the easy road. And whenever somebody pleads in to go to court, to felony drug court, I'm like, you know, you understand it's not the easy road. If you know, you've been taking the path of least resistance long enough, and now you're going to have, you know, you got to be ready for this. So yeah, and so we have to overcome that, and we do that by getting our alumni, our recovery allies, as we like to call them, to come back in and talk to people that might be candidates. We got to convince defense attorneys to talk to people and try to get them into drug court. And it's a tough call for a defense attorney to say, yeah, well, we could get you on probation and you'll get drug screened once a month, but you know, you're not going to get the kind of supervision that you would if you're in one of these programs. It's just not, you know, you're going to be held accountable. So they have to be ready. And, yeah, those are the challenges that we face, but we're making progress, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been interesting listening to you, the both of you. The drug court started in my county. I pushed for it early and made contact with Judge Jay Stewart.
Oh, yeah.
And he really took the ball and ran with
Sure
it.
did.
But it taught me several lessons watching it come together. And the idea came, the judge down in Brunswick at one time was terrific and then moved from judge to queen. and ended up being put off the court. But she was really great in the beginning in doing these things. But what I've found is that, like most things, and you two judges will be shocked to know that all judges don't have compassion. I know it's shocking, but the thing is that, and then you have district attorneys, and this is a very general statement, it's not true. District attorneys who wants to lock everybody up. And you got public defenders who just want to get a chance to plead everybody to jail. You know, so you get a real catastrophe until you have some folk who want to make a difference. And I wish there was a way that we could require all Superior Court judges to spend some time here and deal with the actual problem and see that it's working. But you have so many people who automatically believe, oh, that's just the easy way out. That's nothing. They should be on their way to jail. And Charles Jones, who was majority whip of this house years ago, he told me one day, he said, Al, everybody's for the death penalty until it's their child on death row. And that's true here, too. For a lot of folk who don't have the problem in their house don't like this program.
Well, and if I may, and I don't want to speak out of school, but there are also some district attorneys that do not want to prosecute felony drug cases. And that's a tough sell, because you're like, look, I've had people in my program that tell me if I hadn't got locked up, I'd be dead. If I didn't have this hanging over me 6 years in confinement, I never would have got into treatment. So, you know, that's also part of the deal, but you have to have the prosecution got to be part of the team. You know, they want to put people in the program, and a lot of times they're charged with, you know, property crimes, and it may be drug crimes. But Jay Stewart, 6 counties in his circuit. He runs a 6-county drug court. You know, I got 2 counties in mine that are 8 miles apart, you know, the courthouses. And so the challenges that he faces, and he has a model court down there. He has a bunch of dedicated people.
That's just how we do it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no doubt. No doubt.
Well, I'm just going to concur. I've told you in our private meetings that it's one of my favorite advances in the criminal justice system. I can't imagine why we didn't do this a long time ago. And, you know, making people be accountable, whether it's felony drug charges or mental health or anything else. I mean, they go to court, you give them a fine, you put them in jail for a little while, and they go outside. They don't have support systems. Right. And, you know, some of them may have family support systems, but they divorce themselves from them when they get in a certain set of circumstances. They can't divorce themselves from you without having some retribution, if you will. But I've been to several graduations. I've talked to people involved. I've talked to some of the Superior Court judges, and everybody that deals with this has got a very positive perspective on it. And I think we want to do whatever we can to help you. And spread it. I mean, it works. You know, we need to do things that work. So.
Thank you.
Chairman Powell.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to my dear friend, Walking Lawton. As he had said a while ago, he and I we were in delegation mates my freshman year up here. And then, of course, he went on to bigger and better things, at least ways he could earn a salary for his public service.
I
But,
supported the governor who appointed me, is what happened. Thank God.
In the old days, you know, a lot of us had advocated for drug courts and a lot of the other alternative courts. I remember the argument that came from the bench a lot of times was, oh, woe is me, we ain't going to have the time to do it. And then it took a few good judges out there, and I mean a few good Superior Court judges who actually carved a little bit of time off of their golf matches or whatever it was. And they actually rolled up their sleeves, and they started participating into something that has been a very positive program for the citizens of Georgia, and actually has enhanced the position of a lot of the judges, quite honestly. And I want to thank Lord. I want to thank all the judges out there that actually have participated in furthering this project. Now, that being said, to the members of the committee, there's an old saying we used to have up here that when you're elected to the legislature, you only get one true benefit, and that's the friends you make that last a lifetime. This gentleman right here is as good as they come. I just look at him, I say, where in the hell did your hair turn so gray?
I just know Representative Gunner and I played a lot of golf together back when we were on the bench. Mine too. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Appreciate it.
We really appreciate y'all coming, and we appreciate what you do.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Sexual assault centers. I don't see them, so we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and we'll be right back. We ready to go? Okay, next up is the Department of Law. Afternoon, Mr. Attorney General.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Thank you. No. There we go. Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great to be with you. To you and members of the committee, thank you all so much for having us. We appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, we'll jump right into it. And we are asking again, I want to thank this committee for your support in the amended, for the budget shortfall that we had and the COLA shortfall and the ERS shortfall. We are asking this committee to support that going forward in the to annualize that amount in our continuation budget for FY24. So as a reminder, it was $633,445 in the COLA shortfall and $174,253 in the ERS shortfall. And again, I thank the committee for your support. Additionally, we're requesting $5,774,716 to provide $20,000 merit-based salary increases for our attorneys. And again, I will focus on that merit-based. It's not that everybody would get $20,000. It's that we would have $20,000 per slot. It's about 157 attorney slots that we have. It will allow us to focus on retention as well as increase our starting salary. As I had mentioned in the joint meeting, we're just regularly losing attorneys to other state government positions, in addition to federal and local governments and the private sector, because our salaries just simply haven't been able to keep pace. For example, our starting attorney salary is $65,000, while many private sector firms are paying over $200,000 base plus bonus. Our tort litigation is very similar to insurance defense, so competing with the private sector is very challenging in that particular practice area as well. Just recently, in the last couple of weeks, one of our senior human trafficking prosecutors took a $45,000 pay increase to go work for the DeKalb DA's office. We're experiencing 5-digit pay gaps between our prosecutors and county prosecutors. One former employee recently went to work for a client agency for a $25,000 pay increase. Another is leaving to go to a different state agency for a $40,000 pay increase. Another recently went to work for one of the universities for a $50,000 pay increase. And then next month, we're going to lose one of our specialized lawyers to another constitutional office for a $40,000 pay raise. So our turnover rate has grown from roughly 9% in 2018 to almost 17% in 2022. And we had 50 employees leave during FY22. So providing these salary increases will allow us to better recruit and retain attorneys so that we can continue to provide quality legal representation to the state while keeping SAG costs to agencies down. Because the reality, as I mentioned before, is the state's going to continue to be sued. We're going to continue to have litigation needs, and we'll continue to have legal representation costs. So we can either invest in the Department of Law to provide agencies with representation at no cost to the agency, or we're going to be forced to go to the private sector, hiring SAGs, which agencies will have to pay for out of their own budgets, effectively acting as a litigation tax to those particular agencies. But again, the good news is every year our office generates a revenue that we send to the Treasury for this committee to appropriate and which could be used to pay for our requests. And over the prior 6 years, we brought in on average of a little over $14 million to send to the state Treasury through our consumer protection efforts. And this does not include opioid settlement funding, nor does it include punitive damages cases. And for this year, the first 6 months of FY23, we've already brought in over $22 million and sent it to the Treasury. So, Mr. Chairman, we're asking that you and the committee would use these settlement funds to appropriate the amounts that we need in order to invest in our department rather than outsource it to Special Assistant Attorneys General or SAGs. In fact, I would just point out that the $22.4 million alone just from this first 7 months would justify funding our proposal for nearly 4 years, and we're only halfway through the year and are continuing to generate revenue. So appreciate your consideration there. Our third ask is for $1,750,000, an increase for our Gang Prosecutions Unit Digital Evidence Management System software and storage costs for FY24. Building gang cases and collecting digital evidence requires our office to store and retain incredibly large amounts of data, and in particular, video data. There's been a proliferation of video evidence used in criminal cases and an expectation of juries for the presentation of video evidence. We collect much of this evidence from local authorities, such as in-car, body camera, and municipal video surveillance, and from private sources such as doorbell cameras, business surveillance, hotel surveillance, and airport surveillance systems. This digital evidence management system will enable us to more effectively investigate and prosecute human trafficking and gang cases, and is much needed by our prosecutors. And Mr. Chairman, if okay with you, John Fowler, who is the deputy in charge of our prosecutions division, can mention just a bit about the importance of this database, if that'd be all right with you.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for your time this afternoon. I'm John Fowler. I'm Deputy Attorney General. I'm over the Criminal Prosecution Division for the Attorney General's Office. Currently, the status of how we store evidence is in sort of a piecemeal fashion. Effectively, what we have to do is we have to go out and we have to buy different drives to store the information, whether they're thumb drives or terabyte drives. And this morning, I spoke with the head of our human trafficking section. And in 1 year, we're purchasing over 100 drives just for the human trafficking section alone. And there are different reasons for that, and gangs is in a similar area, which is that we have extremely large amounts of information that are coming in on different medium. Just this morning, I took a look at my own cell phone, and on my own personal cell phone, and I will readily admit that I don't take a lot of videos and upload them to Instagram or anything like that, but my own personal cell phone is over 100 gigabytes. Along those lines, the larger gang cases, we're seeing 20 cell phones, 30 cell phones, and if we multiply that out, we're talking terabytes and terabytes and terabytes. So for each case, we're having to buy terabyte drives, those large drives that sit on your desk that cost hundreds of dollars each. In addition to that, we have human trafficking cases that are getting larger and larger, because what's happening is our analysts are taking a look at the cases inside those cell phones, and they're going through them. And just 2 weeks ago, one of our analysts was going through one of the phones and found another trafficker, was going through our victim's phone and found another person that was trafficking the victim. So what we're seeing is we're seeing results. We're seeing that traffickers are being taken off the streets and additional gang members are being identified that are engaging in this violent activity. But what we have to do at this point is we've got to be able to put that into one singular location so that we don't have this piecemeal way that we do it. And that's really for two reasons. The first reason is because right now we kind of have a way that we, for lack of a better way of putting it, we sort of rent self-storage in each little unit as opposed to putting it all into one warehouse, I think is a good way to put it. So it really does two things. One, it provides us a more secure way of doing it. Because right now all we really have is we have a physical way of keeping it at our desk. And if somebody were to say, unfortunately, do something like try to set our building on fire or something like that, and I don't mean to sound like the doom and gloom, but if that did happen, we would lose it. We would lose it. But the second reason, and the more important reason, is because a great deal of our administrative help and our analysts are spending tons of their time copying this information over to the thumb drives, over to the hard drives. Somewhere between 50 and 80% of their time is copying that information and locking up their computer, when what they could be doing is looking through the cell phones, finding the more information, watching the body cams that we have, watching all the surveillance video, and to get a good idea also of another surveillance video, how much surveillance we get is, just a few years ago, I was prosecuting a case that happened in a Walmart parking lot. And what they do when they turn over all of their surveillance to you is they turn over every video that is down a row of each parking lot. So we're not talking one video over 8 hours. We're talking 10, 15, 20 videos over 8 hours. And taking the time to go through all that can make the difference between apprehending 1, 2, 3 gang members or apprehending 10, 15, 20 that are causing problems in all of our communities and that we're trying to get our hands around. The last thing I would say is this, that we have 17 lawyers in our division, and we go through all 159 counties. And one thing that we know is this, that, and I take a lot of pride in the fact that my people work incredibly hard and do an incredibly good job and produce incredible results. But if we can get them to do even more by saving them time so that they can dedicate their time to trying to find the dangerous people and trying to track down the traffickers and trying to track down the people who are stealing taxpayer dollars and the gang members who are terrorizing our communities, it would be very, very much appreciated. So thank you all very much for your time this afternoon.
So, Mr. Chairman, that again, that's $1.75 million for that digital evidence management system. Our fourth ask, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, is $90,787, an increase for salary, benefits, and operating costs for one human trafficking analyst position in FY24, with the support of First Lady Marty Kemp. Funding for one analyst position within the Law Department's Human Trafficking Prosecutions Unit would enable our office to identify and go after illicit massage parlors throughout the state. And number 5, Mr. Chairman, $16,867, an increase in state funds appropriation for 2 investigator vehicles in FY24 in our Medicaid Fraud and Control Unit program budget. At present, when, as we call them, FUCU has needs requiring field work, personnel utilize the law department rental agreement with a nearby rental car company to arrange for a car. Fleet car access provides greater control and coordination for day-to-day field activities, allowing us to better investigate and prosecute Medicaid fraud and elder abuse crimes. So an increase in $16,867 would allow our unit to access $50,601 in additional federal dollars for a total of $67,468. Mr. Chairman, that's my presentation. I would be more than happy to answer any questions.
Judge Gunner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The digital evidence made me think about the storage of that evidence along with other paper and stuff like that. How long do y'all have to store that? Do you have an idea?
Right? Do we have a... You all go back up to the... Yeah.
For every criminal defendant that is convicted of a felony, they have 4 years to file a habeas corpus petition. And even after that, it has to make its way through the court system. So we would have to store it for years on end, at a minimum of 4 years for each case. So it's going to grow over time.
My experience in the prosecuting attorneys council, I thought it was around 25 years. This is what I thought we had to keep that.
It can be around that long, and particularly the larger cases that stick around for a long time. And if there was even a death penalty case, those we keep forever.
And I guess y'all plan for that. Do you know? I mean, in a DA's office, we generate a lot of files and have to keep those in storage for a long time. And I take it y'all do the same.
Yeah, we do. And then this would be a yearly agreement that we'd have with the cloud-based company. Mm-hmm. So it would be a continuous need
for a long time.
And it will continue to grow, but hopefully, over time, maybe the cost will come down.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few things. First, I absolutely support raising both your starting salary and then other salaries. I think at a minimum, probably $100,000 is where we would want to be as a metric. And then, in terms of some questions with respect to this data management system, my understanding is that it would be completely digital. So then the lawyers can also, you could have multiple lawyers working on it, on the case at the same time and accessing it, which would also increase efficiency as well.
That's
correct?
John,
I see some heads nodding.
Correct, yeah.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And it'll be like encrypted and easy to share with opposing counsel, defense counsel, and if needed, in discovery as well.
In terms of encryption, I think that perhaps that would be a better question for Mr. Rainier. I don't want to speak out of turn in terms of what IT can do and what they can't do. I'm a prosecutor and I do my best with that. But I think that perhaps Mr. Rainier can speak to that a little better than I can.
Who's our chief information officer for the department?
Okay.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. The systems that we've looked at, Certainly supply security, end-to-end encryption at rest and in motion. They meet all of the CGIS standards, which is a national standard that we have to treat all of the data by. Evidence is a little bit funny in terms of storage and how we treat it and maintain the integrity of it over time, because we have to go back and prove that it's never been altered, that it remains, just as clear and concise as it was the day we collected it. And so all of those things are certainly considerations and requirements of the system that we've looked at.
Okay. Yeah, but I also hear what you're saying in terms of the downloading times. I have to do that in my own practice, and it's a nightmare in terms of how much that takes. And the larger the files, the longer that it takes, even if you have very fast systems. Like it's a real issue. And the last question that I have is, recognizing that y'all don't track billable hours like they do in the private sector, my sense is that your lawyers are working very hard, very long days. Can you give us just a little more context in terms of average sort of caseload and workload and things like that?
Sure, and right, I may ask you to step up. And one of the things, though, Representative Holcomb, when a state agency gets sued for damages, we actually do, quote, bill the agency. It's called insured billing. It's $120 an hour. That funding has been used in the past to help fill gaps. This is where I was talking about some of our tort positions,
yes,
competing against insurance defense. So you've got, and right, you can speak a little bit more to that as well, but when you've got employment cases and some of the tort cases, again, we can bill those, but we've had a very difficult time keeping those positions filled. In fact, I think the last time we all met, that we had 4 positions available in our tort section. I think we've hired 1, but we've just had a difficult time post-COVID and then keeping those filled. But, Wright, do you want to speak to that as well as kind of the workload piece?
Sure. We have certain areas in the department where we struggle, one, to fill the positions. We also struggle to keep people. Torts, good area for that. Civil rights is another one, civil rights defense. Employment defense, we've been really lucky in recent history with our employment section. But historically, people realize at some point, hey, I'm basically billing my time here, because most all of the work is insured by the Department of Administrative Services. Law Department is billing DOS for my time, so I'm billing time here. But and I'm all over the state doing the work, and I'm turning in however many hours a week, which is beyond 40 in every case. And there's no end of year bonus. There's no performance. And, it's just, right, it's different. And they realize that it's transferable at some point. So that's always been a challenge. What we're having is, we have this turnover problem. We have the vacancy problem. We have, all these challenges because of the salary situation that the Attorney General has described. What you get into is you're putting more pressure on the remaining people.
Exactly.
If you've got a unit that's supposed to have 8 people in it and it's down to 6, I mean, we all know how that works for the remaining 6 that are still there. The amount of work that comes in is the same amount of work. So.
Right, and judges set deadlines that have to be met. So
right, yeah, you don't. The practice of law is one of the few fields where you have really very limited or no control over your own schedule. And so,
yeah,
I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Well, true confessions. I was at an agency which got sued a lot, and I know how much it costs for the SAGs. And I think it's much more inexpensive to provide our people with decent salaries to be able to do the job and not have to go outside. And I stole away a couple of your lawyers several years ago with the lure of money, and they did a great job for us in some cases, and I thought that we would be well served by having them work for us. But to that end, I didn't catch the exact number again for how much that would cost.
$5,774,716, and
that's
shares
on
about 157 positions. But again, it'll be merit based, so
right,
not everybody gets
But on average, that's
That's correct.
20,000 per
That's correct.
attorney.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what we're asking. It's 20,000
Okay.
per attorney slot.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? We thank you for coming. as
Thank you
always.
again to the committee. Appreciate it. Thank you all for your time.
State Board of Pardons and Parole.
Good afternoon, Chairman Hitchens and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and represent the State Board of Pardons and Paroles and talk a little bit about our FY24 budget proposal. Let me begin by introducing to my right, your left, Kristen Kinney. She is our Chief Financial Officer for the agency. In the row behind us, we have our Crystal Moon. He is our Clemency Division Director, and Felicia Holloway, which is our Field Services Director. If you need to know a little bit more about them, Crystal lets them out, and Felicia puts them back in. So that's how you keep them straight. And if you happen to see a young man flashing a camera around here, that is Steve Hayes, our Communications Director, because as my teenage daughters say, if it's not on social media, it didn't happen. So here we are. Chairman, if I could answer your 5 questions first. And that is, does the COLA fully support our operations? And yes, sir, it does. Our head count, we have 173 full-time employees. That includes our 5 constitutional officers. So we have 168 operational staff. We currently have 2 vacancies. They are in various stages of being filled at this point. Our turnover rate is a little higher than typically. It is 5.17%. And our turnover rate's a little different than some of the other agencies that you hear. Mainly our turnover rate comes from retirements. Right now we have just under 30% of our employees that have 30 years or more. In other words, they could retire today if they wanted to. We actually have a few people that are over 40 years. I think they're going for that old 90% retirement thing, but we love to have them. And again, that just reflects that we don't do a lot of the entry-level hiring. A lot of the people that we bring in are your seasoned investigators. To that point, 72% of our employees are over the age of 40. So that's a lot of knowledge, skills, and abilities that we have within our agency, and I think we do a great job about retaining them once we have them. We have no capital needs or projects, and we do not collect any fees that go into our budget. So in reference to our budget, on your tracking sheet, we start on page 20. Most of our agency line items are statewide changes: teamwork, merit system, DOS, and of course the $2,000 COLA, which we fully support the governor on that recommendations and ask for your favorable consideration. And again, at your discretion, I'll just look at our one request that we have. Is that okay, Chairman?
Sure.
Okay. Our one request can be found in the Clemency Decisions Program, line 35.2.6, and that is provide funds for 2 hearing examiner positions in the amount of $202,233. As we look at the future and the demands of the criminal justice system, we are requesting these 2 additional hearing examiner positions. Hearing examiners are critical to supporting the mission of the board. They are Georgia Post certified officers and classified as state criminal investigators. They are the ones responsible for investigating, rating, evaluating, and presenting cases to the board for executive clemency consideration. It's the board's constitutional responsibility to provide meaningful consideration to all executive clemency eligible cases, and we ask for your favorable consideration so we can meet the current demands of the criminal justice system. And with that, Chairman, that completes our presentation.
Representative Williams.
Oh, I thought I did such a good job, there's no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thought you did such a good job he'd fallen asleep.
Good job, Chris, but for the benefit of the chairman and the members of this distinguished committee, They need to know where you're from.
I'm from the great county of Liberty County, Georgia.
I just thought I'd drop that.
You
Thank
know,
you.
I'm gonna tell you.
That may not help you. Any other questions? Let me ask you about the hearing officers again. What, more in depth, what do they do? I thought I understood the process over there pretty well, but do they actually go out and talk to inmates, or they just go through the records, or they go out and talk to sheriffs or enforcement or judges, or?
Yes and no.
That's a
a
good
great
answer.
answer, right? I liken the hearing examiners much like a district attorney. We've got investigators all across the state that will gather information from all the resources. We've got institutional investigators that will talk with all of the offenders in the system. We've got our victim services folks that will gather information from there. And the hearing examiner, much like the district attorney, is to gather all that information together and present it to the board in a way that they can understand it and make those public safety-driven decisions.
And they do that in a group context with all of them, or do they do it individually with the different board members?
The great thing about us, we're 100% electronic. So everything that they do, they consolidate electronically and present that case electronically to the board, and then it goes through the process. So when COVID hit and everybody was scrambling around to figure out what they needed to do to continue, we were actually able to enhance our operations and provide Department of Corrections with a little physical agility to make room for those efforts that they needed to make on their end.
That allows all of them to work from their office too, doesn't it?
It does. It keeps them around when they're a little more flexible on their schedule, right? I think that may have a lot to do with our tenure.
Any other questions? We appreciate you coming.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
At least I know I got one vote.
You know where their office is.
Wonderful, Mr. Chairman. How are you today?
I'm good so far. I think we're about to wrap this up.
I'll do my best not to get in your way. Are you ready for the Judicial Council?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Charlie Bethel with the Supreme Court of Georgia, and today I'm here before you on behalf of the Judicial Council of Georgia, which, as a reminder, is chaired by virtue of his office by the Chief Justice. I gather that you've asked a few questions of everyone, and I want to try to address those up front. The Administrative Office of the Courts has 61 total employees. 55 of those are state-funded employees. There are an additional 26 employees that work for the Judicial Council, and of course that's attached to the Administrative Office of the Court. So that gives us 87 as a total head count, and 6 of those, as I mentioned, are funded from outside sources, federal sources. We do have various fees that are collected for some of the operations with the for Judicial Council budget. The ones that I'll go over are the Georgia Office of Dispute Resolution, which is actually completely funded by its fee structure. That is to say, those that are registered neutrals pay the fees to operate that program. The Administrative Office of the Courts also manages the Board of Court Reporting, the Commission on Interpreters, and the Commission on Process Servers. All 3 of those charge fees associated with testing and application, and that obviously subsidizes the operations of those offices. And then the Institute for Continuing Judicial Education has a mixed funding model. Obviously, part of their funds come directly out of state funds, but they also have fees associated with their training that they present. And so there's a mixed funding model there. I think those are the ones that are relevant to the questions you all asked. The COLA, I think, if y'all want to give it, nobody's going to turn it down. Everybody's happy with that. I believe for your reference, I'm on page 2 of your tracking sheet, and I'll try to go sort of sequentially through the items that we have before you. I will note that at the end of my remarks, as is our tradition, I'd like to yield to Courtney Veal, who is the acting director of the JQC and Judicial Qualification Commission. Though they fall under the Judicial Council's budget, we have traditionally allowed them to present standalone from us for reasons that I hope are obvious. So in section 6.1, under accountability court judges, We do have a request in the amount of $97,331, which is line item 6.1.1. I do have both Judges Lawton Stevens and Tom Cole, I think, still with us. And then the Executive Director, Taylor Jones, is with us as well. But this is a pretty straightforward request. This is only for 3/4 of the year funding for a position that is currently funded by federal dollars that are phasing out as part of the grant. This is the medication-assisted treatment, the MAT funding, the system tracking, and certainly if we have questions, we'll talk through those. But I will note that we still have 33 accountability courts in Georgia that are currently do not have access to the MAT program just because they don't have resources, and we certainly would not like to see those deteriorated further. Turning to section 6.3, the ICJE, the Institute for Continuing Judicial Education. I will also note that Director Lynn Nelson is with us as well. There's two different requests here. One is one that's a continuation of the request that you approved in the amended budget, which is just truing up a position that was added last year but missed in the COLA process in the benefits piece. So that's on line item 6.3.1. And then on line item 6.3.2, this is a request for increased operational funds. As I mentioned earlier, there is a blended funding model. This is a request that would fund the full administrative cost of the ICJE, and so that's where the $148,980 request comes from, only because it's terribly fun, and in the interest of not giving you the full list, I will just point out that it's always great to beat Florida. And I will point out that Georgia's ICJE operates at a 1 to 537 judges ratio. 1 staff member to 537 judges served, whereas Florida is 1 to 73, so it's always good to beat the Gators. In section 6.4, the Judicial Council and the Administrative Office of the Courts is requesting in total $1.3 million. I'll go through those in line item. At 6.4.1, this is a request for 2 positions. One is a policy counsel position and the other is a policy coordinator position. So in short, one of these positions would staff the policy work of the committees of the council, and the other would coordinate the meetings associated with those staffing and committee meeting needs. The council has seen a steady increase in demand independent of, but certainly exacerbated by COVID-19 and a lot of things that flow out of that, in particular emergency preparedness, and one item that is, I guess, independent of COVID-19 but seems to have sort of come alongside it pretty rapidly, court security, and there's a new standing committee, as I think some of you probably are aware, of Judicial Council on court security, which unfortunately is something we all have to be concerned with today. And so as we have those increased demand, what we are doing is seeing senior staffers do a lot of flexing across groups and across service of committees, and this would help bring in some new junior talent to help extend some of those resources. And so that's the nature of those requests. And I'll certainly, if you've got more questions on those, I will welcome them. And then 6.4.2, in the amended budget, you will recall we requested $70,000 for an enhancement of our automated data collection project. You did approve that, and we appreciate it. $50,000 of that was the one-time cost to get this up and running. $20,000 is the annualized cost of this enhanced automated data collection project, and it is for Amazon Web Service costs, data storage costs, and web support services to keep that system operational. And then on turning to sort of two separate grant-based requests that are in there. On line 6.4.3, you will see a request for $500,000 for a grant program associated with legal self-help centers. A lot of times we talk about law libraries, and I want to make sure that everybody recognizes these are not books on shelves libraries. These are not sort of accumulating dust areas. These are interactive systems where we have individuals who come in generally on a computer platform. Georgia got a federal grant, which has been sort of living out in Albany, and the federal grant cycle has expired. The locals there are supporting it with some resources from other sources as well. Fulton has just opened a very nice new legal self-help center, and the idea behind this project is to create grant funding that requires a minimum of 20% match locally and then resolves the state funding over time. In other words, to reduce it over time so that local communities are providing these resources in their community, but that we can help trigger them. I've mentioned to the chair, we do have, quite frankly, I mean, we feel like we can carry the burden better than we have in terms of justifying the state return on this investment, and we will endeavor to continue doing that with respect to what we've shown so far. But in part, what many of you will appreciate, I mean, the greatest demonstrable value of these programs, at least that I've seen so far, relates to cutting down on repeat visits for pro se litigants. So when someone comes to court and they are representing themselves and the judge has to say, you haven't met, go find a form, and then they're back out and they're back in, just the amount of time that consumes, and I know one member of your committee probably recognizes that more than the rest of us, but the amount of time that consumes, saving that time and reclaiming that has been something that they have demonstrated successfully there. But we're going to continue to work on that project and that program. The next is one that we feel we have a lot more data behind, and that is for the medical legal partnerships that you will see on line 6.4.1. You should have a one-pager, I hope, in your materials that are associated with this. We currently have, associated with Atlanta Legal Aid and Georgia Legal Services Program, two different projects that are operating, one at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and one at Navicent and Macon. The idea behind this proposal is to expand that. We have very, very positive prospects in many communities. I'll say I think the most positive that I'm aware of right now relate to some groundwork being done in the Columbus area and Savannah area. But the model for the medical legal partnership is a attorney who is embedded at a healthcare facility, a hospital, who then serves the patients of that hospital in finding their access to benefits that they're likely entitled to and may not know. It can be as simple as helping them get a guardianship for a child who is not eligible for a transplant because the home environment where the child lives has mold. And you can't get a transplant because the protocols, you have to be in a healthy home environment. But it may be that they have an aunt who has a qualified home environment, and so they can help get a temporary guardianship for the 6 months after the transplant or whatever the window is that's required for them to be in a healthy home environment, and they can get a transplant. It also helps in some cases in the breaking of leases under similar circumstances. So those are the sorts of services, but it's a full spectrum. There are restricted, and you'll see on your handout, there are restricted services that they cannot provide under these agreements, but the savings both to the state, to the hospital systems, and then also local counties in relation to indigent health care are substantial, and we feel really good about the direction and are hopeful that you would be supportive of expanding it. We think the return is certainly documented and justified there. Those are the line items, Mr. Chairman, that I had, and I know the day is getting late, so I probably should stop talking. Probably should have before now, and certainly make myself available for any questions from you or the committee.
We have any questions from the committee? I can't imagine. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that you're not in a hurry to go home, so I figured I'd go ahead and say this. Good to see you, Justice.
It's a pleasure.
Good to see you. I just want to let you know that we miss you. We know you took a pay cut to leave us. Thank you for enjoyed what you talked about. Thank you for the job you do. Thank you, really. And my chairman is urging me to take more time, but I'll let him come back. Go ahead, sir.
I don't have any questions. I appreciate you coming by and
Thank you, Mr.
explaining it
Chairman.
all to me.
And before as I step down, I'd certainly like to ask Ms. Veal to come and speak to the JQC's issue that she has for.
We were going to call him anyway.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Sure.
Thank you, man.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman, and members of the committee. Again, I'm Courtney Veal. I am the Deputy Director of the JQC. I have been in this position since March of 2020, and I am the lucky recipient of the powers and duties of the director for the time being. So I am here to talk to you all today, and this is Mr. Pope Langdale. He's a member of our investigative panel, previously served as our chairman. I am not from Liberty County, so please don't hold that against me. I thought I would go ahead and get that out of the way.
That may be a plus for you.
Just briefly about the JQC, and I'm certain that most of you have heard a bit about this before, likely from Director Boring. The result of the reconstitution of the commission in 2017 was that we have bifurcated panels, right? So we have an investigative panel and a hearing panel. Our investigative panel investigates the complaints and oversees the prosecution of complaints. And then our hearing panel is essentially, I tell people when I'm describing the JQC, they are like our trial judge, and they oversee our matters once they get to the point that we filed formal charges and we are having hearings, which is a very small percentage of the complaints that we receive. We operate independently of each other. And when I say we, I'm considered a staff member of the investigative panel. And one of the things that I thought was important to let you all know today was that in 2021, we saw 542 complaints of judicial misconduct. In 2022, we saw 1,101. So the number of complaints that we received in 2022 doubled essentially from 2021. We still dismiss a large number of the complaints that we receive. The percentage of complaints that we receive that we dismiss has remained fairly consistent, and that has been between 84 to 86% of the complaints that we receive. However, a doubling in the number of complaints means that we are doing a whole lot more investigative work, both on the front end and in the matters that move into preliminary and full investigation. We are, as a result, doing more preliminary investigations and more full investigations. And in our full investigation, that's when we get into subpoenaing, documents, witnesses, and those kind of things. As a result of the increase in our numbers, we are also filing more formal charges, which is what you would expect when you see your complaint numbers double. And then we have had in the last 16 months 3 final hearings in our judicial misconduct matters. And just for reference, 3 over 16 months compared to the prior version of the JQC. I believe there were 2 in the 8 years that led up to 2020. And so just for comparison purposes, I think that figure is significant. And so we are in an odd space. My background is in criminal prosecution, and our matters exist between civil and criminal matters. So there are aspects of civil procedure that we have to follow. And so when our matters gear up for litigation, or we're headed towards motions and a final hearing, we're doing discovery in the same way that civil lawyers do discovery in civil cases, which has been a real treat for me, learning how to do a deposition, because my experience has been in the courtroom. So we are doing standard civil motions practice, dealing with motions for summary judgment, responding to them, having hearings on those motions, and then we are going through the process of conducting depositions in our cases too. And then obviously on to final hearings, and sometimes we have pretrial hearings in between. The result of that, as you can imagine, is that one or at least both of the experienced lawyers that we've had up to this point, which was Chuck and myself, are pulled onto the litigation of the case, especially in our more complex matters. Some of the pretrial preparation is done just by one lawyer, but a lot of the hearings that we have had have pulled both of us into the litigation of the case. And so, again, the result is, and we have 1 staff attorney, so at full staff we have 3 attorneys working for the commission, and we have statewide jurisdiction. And so that is a little bit of a screenshot of what we have been doing in the enforcement / prosecution realm of what we do. We also have an educational component to the JQC. I think it is incredibly important, just as important as the enforcement piece, if not more so. And I say if not more so because, and I truly mean this, I think it is incredibly important for us to be at every judicial conference, educating judges on the Code of Judicial Conduct, new trends, new issues that we're seeing. I recently did a 2-hour presentation with Judge Dillard to the Superior Court judges just on social media. And a 2-hour block for that was filled just with instruction on social media. I recently did a new judge training for state court judges. I really enjoyed it because one of the things I realized is that they don't already have their minds made up about the JQC. So it was nice to be able to kind of get in there on the ground floor, if you will, and meet those judges and start to establish a rapport with them and give them pointers about the major issues we see. I think if we are doing a better job in the educational piece, which I would love to do and do more of, then hopefully one day these numbers on the enforcement piece will drop. So that brings me to our request. Prior to Director Boring leaving the agency, he submitted a request for $49,351 as an increase in funds for investigative panel personnel. And so we are not seeking to add an additional attorney position, even though I would like one. What Chuck and I have been doing is contracting out some investigative counsel assistance and having people assist us on a part-time hourly basis with specific investigations. So say, for example, if Chuck and I have a need to be in Atlanta, or we're both tied up with litigation or an ICJE presentation, we oftentimes have needed to send counsel and or our investigator to somewhere in South Georgia or whatever, need them to step in. And so Chuck's idea for this proposal was, and I support this and I think it makes sense, is to take those funds that we have been using to have contract assistance in the investigator or investigative counsel capacity and add some additional money to it, thus the $49,351, so that we will have a full-time investigative counsel attorney position on board with us, instead of kind of piecemealing and having that position be a contract position. I think it would assist us significantly, and obviously this request is different than the one that was heard last year for the hearing panel, and the counselor for the hearing panel, which I know that set of funds was a subject of some of our recent hearings. So I welcome any questions.
How many total personnel do you have?
5.
5?
Yes, sir.
How many are attorneys?
Right now, 2. Once the director position is filled, it will be 3.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're really, really lucky, generally speaking, in our state. We have excellent judges across the board, from our highest level courts all the way down. But it does seem anecdotally that the frequency of misconduct seems to be increasing, and it seems like your report validates that to some degree. That's of course extraordinarily concerning for obvious reasons, and I am curious in terms of interventions, although part of me just thinks if you make it in life to where you're a judge, you really should know better. So that's one observation. And with respect to your caseload, though, where are you in terms of the backlog? Because it looks like if you have approximately 1,100 or so, 85%-ish are dismissed. And are those mostly just sour grapes of people that don't like how the judges are ruling, as a broad characterization? Is that fair?
Yep.
That's definitely fair. Our number one reason for screening out or dismissing at the initial stage is that whatever the individual is complaining about is a legal or an appellate issue. So we, I don't always necessarily agree with the judge's ruling, and certainly the complainants hardly ever agree with a judge's ruling. That doesn't make it improper or unethical.
Right.
And so that legal appellate issues are the number one reason that we do screen out complaints. There was something else you said too, and for my judges in the room, I agree with you. The majority of our bench in the state is wonderful.
Yeah.
And the complaints the number of complaints that we are actually filing formal charges on and are proceeding to trial on, I'm talking 2 to 3% of the complaints that we receive. So we are reserving the formal charges and the trials for the very serious complaints that we are seeing. I don't know that judicial misconduct is necessarily increasing. I do know that the media loves the JQC for whatever reason. I don't love that. I don't want to be on there. I don't want to be a part of it, but that's the nature of it, right? And that's part of how the public becomes aware of what we're doing and the fact that we're doing our job. The media coverage of our matters and the things that Chuck and I have seen accomplished during our time at the JQC has been very widespread. And so I do think as the word has kind of gotten out that there is a state agency that handles complaints of judicial misconduct, and people see and start paying attention and think, oh, well, you guys are doing something. I think that has contributed in part to the number of complaints that we've seen come in. I've talked to lawyers that have been complainants in our cases who have said to me, this has been weighing on me for a year or a couple of years, and I have never felt comfortable reaching out because I didn't think anything would ever be done. But I see that you guys are taking action, and so I'm going to go out on a limb and report this to you. And of course, I give them the disclaimer, can't promise you anything. However, we will look into it. I think that has happened, number one. Number two, the courts reopening post-COVID, people are getting back into court and judges are working through their backlogs very quickly. And so I think that's contributed to the increase in our numbers. And number three, we went to an online system that allows individuals to submit complaints online versus in previous years. And when Chuck and I began, when I began in 2020, you had to mail the forms to the JQC office. Now we, much like the state bar, allow people to go online and submit complaints online. So I think those factors definitely have contributed to the increase in complaints that we've seen.
Yeah, and that all makes sense, and I think it's a mixed bag in that the negative stories certainly don't help the public standing of the judiciary, but to your point, is it does show that there is accountability, and I think that that's net a positive. So my last question is, do you have any sense of when the Supreme Court is going to rule on the one pending case, because that has a budgetary implication?
Yes, sir.
You need to leave.
I will say this. I know that there has been concern and frustration about the amount of time that some of our serious formal charges matters have been pending, the time it has taken for us to charge and then to get to trial, and we are cognizant and understand those concerns. I will say that we began last year with a trial backlog of, I believe, 7 matters or 6, and then we added a 7th. Right now, after that matter is resolved, we have 2 that are pending hearing. So we have done a lot of work to work through the trial backlog, if you will, and I'm hoping that we can keep it that way.
Okay.
No more questions? We appreciate it. We appreciate what you do. I know it's a tough job. I make the analogy, it's kind of like what we do. It doesn't matter which way you vote. You make somebody mad. I mean, it's an adversarial. You're the referee in adversarial circumstances, and that was my sense. And I've been involved with it somewhat with some of your investigators. But if you lose, you have resentment, and then you file a complaint. And not many winners file complaints. Well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Public Defender Council. It's who we've been waiting for. Okay, we're ready when you are.
Yes, sir. Chairman Hitchens and all the other members of this body, thank you. Good afternoon, almost evening. Good to see you all. Please allow me to just say thank you before I even get into our request to the governor's office and to all of you members of this body. I say thank you. Representative Gunther, thank you. I always say if I had 1,000 million languages to say thank you, I don't think I can say thank you.
I'll give us back to
Thank you so much. Today we have more attorneys and offices directly serving clients than at any point in the agency's creation, and we thank you all for what you have done. Just over 30 years ago, I was a public defender myself, and I never thought there would be a day when public defenders will be getting this much consideration. Whatever you give to us, we invest in our employees and in our communities because we want to make sure that we just don't represent and release people. We represent and renew, sending people to college, technical schools when they leave us. And that cannot be possible without you. So thank you so much for all you do. We're not without our challenges. We have made a lot of progress over pre-2020 years. Since 2020, when attorneys were regularly furloughed. That was before I came here. And we had hiring freezes, and which caused delays in court systems and deferring justice. We're incredibly grateful for the passage of HB 1391. I cannot say it enough. And that was historic, that was unprecedented, and that established equity between public defenders and prosecutors. Your support has allowed us to do all that we have been able to do in the last 2 years, which is a lot. We are in support of the governor's office budget. We thank Director Farr of OPB because of their support and what we have been able to do because of that support. Because we have that parity with the district attorney, we want to make sure that we have resources that will put us in tandem with the district attorney so that we can be there to provide resources so we can do the work, that we can respond to the work that they are doing. And you will be hearing from the Prosecutors Council tomorrow. Respectfully, they're seeking new funding. And so we come to you with respect to our governor's budget, but we're asking you to please provide to us, in the interest of that parity, we respectfully ask that we receive the same consideration with regard to the new funding that they will be asking for. Tomorrow, I believe they'll be asking for about $10 million. And we want to make sure that once they get the money and they're doing the work, that we're there to respond to the work that they are going to be doing. So in the spirit of HB 1391, the importance of equity among our partners, we seek the following. And I hope you have a copy of that with you. Yes, sir. And so the first one, if you respectfully grant us the $8.9 million in funding, we continue to reinvest in our employees and our communities. We promise to do that. Number two is $1.15 million will be used to fund the HB 1391, which was the mandate from 2022. $5.2 million will be used to move all our employees in the state, investigators, administrators, social workers position to a step up in the ladder of compensation. We have sufficient staff to fulfill our statutory mandates. We do have some We have vacancies like any other agency, but we have created very creative ways to make sure that we can meet our mandates. And I will speak to that in a minute. We're raising compensation a step for this position will aid us in recruiting and retaining talented litigators and public servants. And that will ultimately lessen the strain on circuit offices, local court systems, and address the legal deserts that we have. We do have some legal deserts. There's some places in our state where we don't have attorneys at all. But what we do is that we have a system in our office where we can dispatch attorneys. We call them traveling lawyers, to make sure there's always someone there to attend to the needs. Chairman Hitchens and members, I spend a whole lot of time traveling this state to take economic development courses so that I can make sure that we are contributing back to the system. And I am a proud recipient of their certificate. And I went there specifically for one reason, to say, how do we reinvest the people leaving the criminal justice system? What do we do to make sure that they're back in the system and they can help to expand the tax bracket? And we're doing that. Number 4 is $2 million will be used to fund attorneys to defend clients in the gang and RICO cases that we're beginning to get a lot of. It's been an explosion of gang and RICO cases. Fulton County right now, we are in the process of a case which is 28 clients. We can only take one, which means the remaining 27 clients will cost the state $270,000. So we're asking for that $2 million to be able to address these cases that are coming to us we don't have any influence, we don't have any control as to when they come, but we want to make sure that we're there to provide representation when and if they do. We want to ensure that we can fairly compensate attorneys who are going to be trying these cases, sometimes up to 6 months, the way we're going at this rate. Number 5 is $217,743 will be used to provide public defenders for the new judges that we have at Blue Ridge, Mountain, and South Georgia. You know there's a statutory requirement that we provide public defenders for these judges, and the $217,743 will be the annual amount to provide that. The number 6 is $322,953. We have created new offices all over the state, especially in the rural areas, because we want to make sure that we're providing services closer to where our clients are. So we have new regional offices, we call them, and we need space for them. We've been managing to provide space with the county, but it's gotten to a point where we have to have space for these attorneys and the investigators and the administrative staff that we are putting in these areas to work. That's what we're asking, $322,953. We ask this respectfully, and everything comes to $8.9 million. Thank you.
And that's in addition to what's in the governor's recommendation?
Yes, sir. And we like I said, we support that extensively, and with thanks, the $2,000 cost of living adjustment. Yes, sir.
It's quite an ask. Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Prosecuting Attorneys Council is in the judicial branch, and it's made up of the district attorneys on the council. How are y'all set up? I know you're in the executive branch. Do y'all have a council of public defenders, or how does that operate?
Yes, we do. We have a council of about 7 individuals who are over the public defenders, but we're under the governor. We're in the governor's budget.
All right. And with the prosecutors, they do their own training. Do y'all set your own training, or how does that work?
We do. In the last 2 years, we have had to come back in-house to provide our own training, and we have done very well. So we have a training that's public defenders for public defenders. We go all over the state so that we can bring our training closer to the jurisdictions.
So you do smaller group training and
yes,
going
we
around?
Do. We
Okay.
do.
And you have some funds in here for conflict attorneys, is that right?
Yes, sir. So we're asking for $2 million to be able to, when we have those gang and RICO cases, it's, we're paying, okay, let me step back. When I came, the cost for representing a felony was $3,500. For juvenile cases, it was $350. And that was a big problem. I used to joke that you probably can't find anybody to sing happy birthday to a child for that amount. Talk of representation. We have increased that to $1,500 for juveniles and $7,500 for felony cases. This is the highest it's ever been in the history of this agency. And we're making sure that we compare ourselves statewide, not statewide, countrywide, to what other agencies are doing. And we're doing very well countrywide.
Okay, and I guess how's your turnover rate as far as with new public defenders, that kind of thing?
So it ebbs, you know, we have periods that we're doing very well, and then we'll have periods when people leave. And so because we don't have the luxury of saying, oh, it's the great resignation, we can't find lawyers, we created something called the specialized unit. We call them the traveling lawyers. Mm-hmm. When there's an issue, we will dispatch from Atlanta to go to wherever area we need to be. I've also met with the Council of Superior Court Judges at least 3 times in the last 2 years to let them know when there's an issue. They just need to let us know there's an issue, and we will make sure we find an attorney on the spot. Mm-hmm. We've also given them the opportunity to suggest attorneys to us who are in the courtroom when should there be a situation where you have a client who's in court who doesn't have an attorney. And why does that happen? Sometimes they've had private counsels that they cannot pay for anymore, and suddenly they need a public defender. So we've given our Council of Superior Court Judges the opportunity to just reach out to us, letting us know there is an attorney in the courtroom who will take the case. As long as the client is indigent and the attorney qualifies, we will appoint on the spot.
Okay, and going back to the conflict attorneys, that's a required cost, right?
Oh, it is, and that cost is going up tremendously too, by 60%.
Yeah. And are you able to find the conflict attorneys you need?
We're finding, so instead of just finding them for per diem, we have created monthly contracts. That's worked better for us. So we have multi-county contracts, mm-hmm. which means you take the cases in a particular area. We have one single circuit contractor, which means you take a case in one particular area. So that's worked for us, and we try to give the cases out like maybe 100 cases for a certain amount. Mm-hmm. And that amount is what's gone up by about 60%. It compares, we are very, very competitive with anyone, I believe, in this country.
Okay, and just a couple more questions.
Yes,
I notice in your sheet here that you have Blue Ridge, Mountain, and South Judicial Circuits for
yes,
the
sir.
positions, public defender positions there. This year, we've already sent out of the Judiciary Committee and to the floor, and it's passed over to the Senate, Daugherty County, which will start, if it's passed over there, July 1 of this year.
Oh.
So has that been included in your budget?
No,
It has
sir.
not?
No, sir.
And I got a feeling that the other two, I think it's Coweta and Atlantic.
Oh.
Atlantic, for sure.
Yeah, Atlantic for sure. I'm not sure about Coweta, but anyway, those are 2 more that are coming in, and possibly 1 more.
Oh.
Augusta has come in and asked for it because of the split in that, from Columbia, and that may be another cost. I don't know that y'all are aware of that.
I did not figure that into this. I apologize, but what I can do is review what I have, is send it to you, because we are definitely going to need public defenders to service those areas.
Yeah.
Usually we wait till it passes and then
Right.
it gets put in.
Okay. Well, we got 1 well on its way,
Yeah.
and the other 2 will be coming through, and I don't know about Augusta yet, but I know that they've been asking about that too. So, thank you.
And I feel confident they're gonna pass, and I wouldn't be too tardy, because the ship may sail on you.
I'll take care of you, sir.
Representative Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask you this as I go down your list. you're looking for parity to the as compared to the prosecuting attorneys.
Yes, sir.
In these areas where you're asking,
Yes, sir.
will this bring you into parity?
We already got the parity. We got it last year.
I was going to say that. I was wondering, so you said you were looking for, but tell me this now. When you increase the funds, compensation here, like with, to raise state attorney starting compensation,
Yes, sir.
give me some of your thoughts on that. I'm trying to catch up with you now.
So when the prosecutors go up, it's best for us to go as well. If not, we create that gap again. And not just a gap in performance, is a gap in attrition.
But
Yes,
you just told me that you were up.
No, we got the parity.
Yeah.
Legislated.
Yes.
So that means that when they go up, we respectfully ask you to allow us to go up for them. Yes, sir.
So you're trying to keep up with. That was
Yes,
my
sir.
reason. Yeah, okay.
Yes, I want to keep up with them.
Yeah, request. Okay. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that will bring you into parity. Okay. If you don't get this request, you're not going to be in
No, sir.
parity.
No, sir.
Okay, that needs to be plain, because what happened last year, you have to keep you keep moving,
Yes, sir.
or you're out of parity.
Yes, sir.
That's what I'm trying to make sure. And on these new judgeships,
Yes, sir.
I am surprised that there are only two that's showing on here, and we know of some others, just as you pointed out, Judge, that are definitely coming online. And as the chairman stated, I would suggest you all do that sooner rather than later, because the train is kind of greased and it's moving. It's just taking on some late passengers, but not many. Okay, but I just wanted to make that. Now, we talked about the turnover. I think your question was about the turnover, and we got an answer to that. That I had written that down. And what's the starting pay for?
Right now for the state is $65,000, and that's gonna at least about 10,000 in the last 2 years. We are trying to get to 83,000.
Okay. All right. I'm looking forward to your visit to Liberty County,
I am going to be
where
there.
so more folk will learn what it is before they need you.
Yes, sir.
You know who you are and where you're going, because we do look forward to seeing you there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to build on Representative Williams' question in terms of item 2 on your one-pager for the starting compensation for 1, 2, 3, and 4, recognizing that you have an aspiration to get to 83,000 as the starting. What would the actual numbers be for these positions?
It will be 83 for APD 1. For APD 2, it will be 93 or 94.
Okay.
And for APD 3, it will be 102, and the last one will be 114. And thank you for asking that question, because it's something I forgot to say. When our CPDs went up, it is necessary for us to go up by a certain percentage. And that's the percentage that I figured into this. In addition to the parity and the elevation of our CPDs, this is necessitated to take these numbers up a little bit.
Okay, so if this is approved, then the starting salary will be 83,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And then my second question is the 7,500 flat rate that you said, if somebody gets assigned to that complicated RICO case that you said would take up to 6 months, are they signing up for $7,500 to take a 6-month case?
They did, but we are going to give them a supplement. And I just was not going to, because we have sent an email or contacting the 4 people that we assigned to those cases to make sure that we can give them a supplement, because they're going to be on that trial for 6 months.
Right.
Yes, sir. And so we have sent a message to them, or we're going to. We spoke to our attorney who is on that panel so that we can do that. We're definitely going to do that.
Okay. Yeah, because if the pay is $7,500 for 6 months, that's not going to work.
Not at
So,
all.
yeah, yeah.
Not at all.
So, okay, all right, thanks.
Sounds like legislative pay 7,500 for 6 months.
Okay, if no question, we appreciate it. Appreciate you
Chair.
coming.
Thank you.
Anybody else here that has any business before the committee? Yeah.